Good evening and welcome along to YFS HQ for the second edition of the Youth Football Scotland live debate show. This week's topic is on coaching young players, and we've got a very illustrious panel along with us tonight. We have Thomas Smith, or Tam Smith, I'm sure he likes to be called, from Hutchison Vale FC. We've got Graeme Mathie, the Head of Player Identification and Recruitment from Hibernian FC. We've got Declan on his right there from the Declan Fergus Academy and Hart of Midlothian. And we've also got Ross Gray from the Gold and Grey Soccer Academy and Rob Hart. And we've got plenty to talk about over the course of the next hour or so. Rob, you're particularly involved in sports science, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. And obviously, we'll give everyone a chance to kind of discuss their coaching philosophies, but in terms of sports science, is there a specific philosophy that's generally accepted, or is it a case-by-case, person-by-person basis?
I think the way I like to see it is coming from a coaching background and then going into sports science, is that you're really just trying to encourage people to live a little bit more healthy. You're trying to encourage them to eat the right things, exercise the right way, and live their life in a way that basically sees them live happily and happily ever after and all that. So.
And Tam, what for me here at Hutchison Vale, is there a coaching philosophy for the whole club? Is there one for each age group?
Yeah, we're trying. It's very difficult because obviously we're a voluntary organisation. We've got a turnover of coaches, we have others that stay a long time. But we have what we called a measured step system at the youngest age groups. That was implemented in 1989, where we have what's called the first touches, which are kids probably 5 and 6 year old, and then they go to the Friday night, which is called the Tot School, and they have a 4-a-side programme, and teams called the Robins and all the different names that are associated with that, and then there's a 6-a-side, which is a Monday night, and that's at 2 age groups over and above that. And there's certain rules. They'll have 3 zones, initial 3 start plays, balls not allowed off the ground, there's all the different things like that. And so that, and we don't have any negative shouting. If there's any negative shouting, we stop the training at that point, just to explain to the kid that that's not what we want to hear. And so, and obviously parents are always to shout from the touch lines. And so that philosophy brings the kids on quite well, I would say, the youngest age groups. And you're trying to, I think all coach education should be ultimately about empowerment. So you're trying to get the kids to take responsibility for not just their behaviour, but for the way they play, and the responsibility to their teammates and the club.
Yeah, I mean, something you mentioned there, we'll come to talk about that, is the kind of pressures, especially on volunteer clubs, of implementing things like coaching philosophies. But Rose, for yourself, do you have a particular philosophy that you like to follow, and indeed, do you think that has it always been the same, or has it changed over the years for yourself?
Well, it's obviously easier for us because we're not a team, so we offer additional training, so we structure our sessions for each different age group. But pretty much for us, from 5 to 12, we think the kids should be just touching the ball as much as possible. So we design all our training sessions to give players maximum touches and get them comfortable on the ball. After that, you can start to drop in tactics and stuff, but we think between 5 and 12, they should just learn to master the ball. Everything we do is in tight areas, we try and minimise cues, stuff like that. So, as I say, it's just getting younger players more comfortable, left foot, right foot. Everything we do is to try and make them more comfortable on the ball.
And Graeme, obviously at Hibernian it will be, even with such a successful club like Hutchison Vale, it will be a different kind of ball game, pardon the pun, but is there a particular coaching philosophy or footballing philosophy that you've always followed, or did that change?
Well, I've been in the role now at Hibernian for the last 2.5 years, so it's my colleague Eddie May that heads up the coaching aspect of the club, so my role is very much in the player identification structure. So we've got sort of 4 unique strands to it: the pre-academy, junior academy, intermediate academy and senior academy recruitment. So again, we'll be looking to ask our scouts to go and identify different things at those age levels. But Eddie's implemented a similar structure in the coaching framework, so there's now a head of a junior academy who looks after, just similar to what Ross has touched on, the development of technique at the younger ages and trying to make sure that all the building blocks are in place. That if a player joins our academy at 9-year-old, 10-year-old, by the time they're 20 or 21, they've got all the skill sets that we need to become a first team player.
Mm-hmm. And Declan, with the Declan Fergus Academy and obviously with Hearts as well, is there anything in particular that when you are sitting down, to come up with a coaching session that you think, right, I need to make sure that my philosophy is evident here, and is evident throughout?
Yeah, definitely. I believe that it's we try to get them to express themselves, the creativity within the players, and at Hearts and in my personal academy I try to implement that within both. At Hearts there's a clear structure and philosophy which is from the top, goes right down, technical development with the young kids, principles of play as we move on. In my personal academy I try and follow on from that, so it links in and it's all good.
Yeah, so there's a wide range, and I'm sure that we'll cover the different ways that we like to play football, the way we like to see it be played. Get involved on Twitter and on Facebook and via email. You can email us debateshow@youthfootballscotland.co.uk with any questions, statements, and indeed if there are for any specific members of the panel, do include that. If you're watching on the Facebook Live, simply put a question or a comment down at the bottom and we can get that to our panel as well. We'll have Robbie Forsyth over there looking at the emails and the statements on Facebook. But for the purposes of this debate, as we're talking about coaching young players, it's maybe worth nailing down what is a young player. What age range is that? Does it stop at 16? Does it stop at 18 to 21? I mean, we would probably class the under 21 still as youth football, but it's a completely different type of young player than it is from a 11, 12-year-old. And Tam, go first, you got that.
Well, I think, clubs like ourselves, youth clubs, deal with the young players from the very start. I think, the senior clubs, you can play for the first team at 20 and you're still classed as a very young player. So there is that, I think young players depend on the environment and the context in which the environment is. I mean, if you're dealing with youth structure, then you've got to make sure that they're catered for the very youngest age groups, and the other coaching is realistic to them as well. And we've got to remember the fun's a big part of it as well. We've got to make sure there's fun integrated all the way through the programme, no matter what age group you're in. I think at the senior club it's a different game altogether. You've got young lads coming in from 16, and okay, they've got the youth teams and the pro youth leagues, but when they sign their first professional contract, it's a new ball game for them because they'll be training with seasoned professionals, so they're very much the younger element in that particular part of the club. And the learnings, not just for the coaches, the learnings for the senior players that they're playing with. And all the ex-players from Hutchison and Vale went on to play the game. They used to get the feedback that it was great playing with whoever it was, and he was in his 30s and learned so much from it. Probably learned more maybe playing with his player for 6 months than they did in the previous 5 years. You get that type of feedback. So it depends on the context and the player finds himself. You've got to cater, I would say, for everything.
And to you guys then, obviously, because you'll see players going through the different age levels, what are the differences between a 11-year-old young player and say a 16-year-old young player? And when do you start thinking of a young player as a potential for the senior team? How young does that start? Go to you first.
I think that's $1 million question. I think what we try and ask our scouts to identify is a player who would have the potential to play a minimum of 50 times in the Hibernian first team. That's when you really establish yourself as a first team professional footballer. So to try and identify those skill sets in an 8-year-old is nigh on impossible. So I think it's about being realistic to say that, and we spoke about this, guys, before the show, that a lot of it is to do with your sort of psychological skill set. How can you, and Tam raised a couple of really interesting points here, but coaching, I think, can also be termed as teaching. So, and it's not only an individual at the side of the pitch with a tracksuit that coaches or teaches. Tam said it can be colleagues on the pitch. A lot of the times it can be the environment that the player's in. Sometimes it's pressures that they're in. Sometimes it's things that they've learned away from football that they can then relate into their football journey, and actually show. Key things for us would be resilience, an opportunity to go and show if you've been disappointed, you can actually go and go again and do the things that you should be doing, because unfortunately any level of the game, it's the one thing that the sport guarantees you is at some point you'll be disappointed. You'll misplace a pass, you'll make a mistake, you'll be a substitute in a game, you'll be taken off in a game, you'll be injured. So unless you've got an ability to deal with these pressures and these situations, regardless of what level you're playing at, it's highly unlikely you're going to go and continue your development.
Yeah, and I think as well for yourself, Declan, if you're talking about a young player, when do Hearts start viewing, or yourself as well with your own academy, when do you start thinking of a player as, right, okay, he's now no longer young, he's now a senior player and an adult player. So, and what's that change like? You know.
Well, I've got under 12s at Hearts, and we've just went from 7-a-side to 11-a-side. So within that itself, it's a transition. It's big for them. It's new things. So we're big on technical development and preparation to that. Now it's a lot on tactics as well, incorporating position-specific training. Now you can start to see the kids on the 11-a-side pitch, how they're dealing with that, other elements that come with it, and then you can start to gauge them with the players above at 14s, 15s, 17s, and how you compare.
And I put this to everyone, but you talk about that transition from 7 to 11-a-side, and I think something that crops up quite often is the possibility of 9-a-side football. I mean, in general, we'll go to you first, Declan, are you in favour of that, or do you think it's too tough to implement? Or
it's a difficult one. I think, well, my boys personally have taken very well to 11-a-side. They've had some great results since the Christmas break, in performance as well, because that's the most important, what I'm gauging them on. I think 9-a-side is possibly a good idea. It makes that transition slightly easier for them. I notice that the pitch is very big for us at the moment. 9-a-side could have an impact on that if the pitch is the right dimensions. So I think it'd be worth a try.
What about something else? Ross, what's your kind of...
No, I think 9-a-side could be a good idea. Obviously, when you're 12 and you're in a massive park, first team park, how many times you're going to be touching the ball?
And I think it's the goalkeepers as well, isn't it? You know, you see like poor wee kid who's maybe a great keeper at 7-a-side, but he goes to 11s and he's got no chance of anything that goes above his head. You know, but is it something that you'd actively get behind if it was, you know?
Definitely. As I say, our big thing is touches the ball. We don't think if you're 10, 11-year-old and you're on a massive pitch freezing all the time, how many times you're going to be touching the ball, you're going to stand about, and you're not learning anything from that. Whereas if 9-a-side, it's tighter areas, more touches, I think we'll benefit more from that than what they would go on to a big massive park.
Tam and Duncan, 9-a-side football, do you think it's possible in Scotland?
Whether it's possible, I think it would need a huge level of investment. It would need a huge level of time spent working with coaches and clubs and explaining why, like we've identified the increased level of touches, the increased number of times the kid's going to be asked to go 1v1, whether it's defensively. And the more you increase that exposure to those scenarios, the better you hope that they start to cope with them. So I think from a point of view that it would do the kids a favour, and it also means that your kids that aren't physically developed enough to cope with the demands of an all-side game actually have an opportunity, almost delaying that start. I mean, some people maybe say it's a different game, almost like your futsal. I don't think it is. It's the same principles of play come into action, whether it's 2v1, 3v2, attacking, defensive. You're just asking the kids to go and play, and hopefully I would argue from the kind of the sports science side of things as well, it would allow them to develop the change the directions as well, without asking them to run 20 yards or 30 yards, if that makes sense. So everything just becomes a wee bit tighter and a bit shorter as well. So for a running point of view, they get more sprints in there without actually
over-exerting. And I'm actually glad you touched on that, because in terms of a young player, from a sports science point of view, you'll know in terms of the way the body works.
Yeah.
When does someone become a young player? You know, when does someone become an adult? You know, you see.
There's lots of there's lots of research suggesting that some players aren't kind of physically developed until they're 20. In terms of their mental maturation, you're talking sometimes 24, 25. So everyone's an individual. Everyone needs to be treated as an individual in that case, and that's when you come into kind of talent identification as well, as to, well, okay, and again that's maybe why 9-a-side would help, because it is a big jump. And maybe for the early developers it's not as big a jump. Do you know what I mean? However, I would say from a concentration level thing as well, it's easier to concentrate on the balls constantly, or there's no chance the ball coming at your heart all the time. Whereas we know fine well on the side games, even at the top professional level, guys can spend minutes off the ball.
Alan McCoy spent 11 minutes spending 60 minutes on the ball popping up. But just before we move on, Tam, I'd like to get your opinion on this, obviously from a grassroots level. Do you think 9-a-side would be something that you could implement at that level? Because obviously touching the kind of volunteer side
I think you can. I think the problem a lot of the Scottish football is people not coming together and looking at the greater good. And we've got to think of our children, and we've got to think people always think we think of the national team, well, fine, but if we get it right and we build for the bottom and we invest properly at the bottom, then, you know, and we've got the right people in, who've got a broad mind, and can start thinking outside the box, no pun intended. But I think the natural progression from 7 to 11s is through 9s. I know that in the last year or so for 7s, our boys didn't enjoy it. And funny enough, the pro youth teams can start it 6 months earlier than I don't quite get that one. I think this rule should be the same for everybody. I think there was a move years ago where I think Gordon Smith was behind that. And I like Gordon Smith as the chief executive of the SFA when he was in. I mean, he actually used to phone some of the youth clubs and invite them through to Hampden for chats, and I thought he was very refreshing when he looked to implement new ideas. And one of them was getting the intermediate goals. Now, he delivered a whole lot intermediate goals. I know we took up the offer, I know we took it, I don't know, it must have been other clubs. As soon as we played our first game in a pre-season friendly with them, and I've got to say it was brilliant, because the wee goalie and the big goal didn't exist. And it was much more realistic.
Yep.
The pitch was cut as well. To you know, it was an 80 to 55, I think we made it. That's for the 60-40, which is a soccer 7 size. And then you've got the bigger size for the 11 sides. I think in many ways it is a different game, kids football.
Well,
yeah, because it's education, and you can only educate by building up slowly. And I think building up the physicality and the surrounds is every bit as important as everything else.
yeah, so I'm glad that you said that, and I'm sure there are other countries that do 9-a-side. I think there's some countries in the continent that do that. But Eta mentioned there that obviously the pro youth sides get that 6-month head start. Do you think that makes up for it, or do you think that a 9-a-side season would be better than 6 months ahead for 11-a-side at the professional youth level?
I think I'm probably speaking more about the coaching side of things rather than what my sort of job remit is, but it's probably the reason for why we're doing it is key here. You know, are we doing it to transition players to 11-a-side as quickly as we can, or are we doing it to actually help develop the players at different ages and stages? So 9-a-side's been a debate in Scotland for a number of years. 4-a-side quickly became 5-a-side, you know, to include the use of a goalkeeper. Other countries actually do 8-a-side because they think it fits in more with their sort of tactical plan. You know, others that are not. So again, finding something that works for everybody can be quite challenging, but I think it's actually finding the reason for doing it within the pathway. And I think, you know, these debates are good because we're not just speaking about teams or systems of play, we're speaking about individual players, we're speaking about, touched on there, you know, growth, the early developers, late developers, growth and maturation. All these things I think need to be put into the pot when you have this discussion. So I don't think there's an easy answer, if I'm honest.
We've got a question directly kind of on this point for you, Graeme, but I suppose everyone can come in on this because everyone will have their own opinions. But this is from Ryan Williams of the Dunfermline Press. He asked, as head of player identification and recruitment at Hibs, what's the first attribute you look for a player at certain ages?
So I think,
and on that point, I'd like to, I know you're interested in talent identification, that's kind of your thing, so could you bring that in?
No, for sure. I think my role is predominantly to sort of look after the first team aspect, which I think is a separate conversation. But in terms of leading the youth side of things, we have an event every Christmas where we look at trying to solidify, if you like, our under-11 squad for the following year. And it's pleasing for me that if we bring in somewhere between 16 or 20 players, there's a mixture within that group. Some of the kids are taller than others, some of them are smaller, some of them are more technical, some of them are quicker, some of them are physically a little bit more developed than others. Some of them maybe have one attribute that separates them from the rest of the group, be it a striker that can put the ball in the net or a defender that just likes defending. So for me, it gives me a good level of comfort that the guys at the youngest ages are looking at a broad level of things. They're not just trying to identify a certain type of player and making that fit in a box. But one of the big things that we do as part of our process is have, rather than calling it a trial period, is a training period. And that's the most important thing for us, to actually move from identifying somebody on the side of a pitch, asking them to attend our club, to then make an offer to sign them. Because we have taken 2 players at the same age group last year from the local boys club game, who are both early developers. They're both physically very mature. They influence games because of their size and their physical attributes. But what we wanted to do was make sure that we worked with them for a period of time to know they had the application, the desire, the willingness to learn and to improve on the other aspects of their game, so that once they get to a point where everybody else catches up with them physically, they can then potentially still progress and have a future beyond that. So I've probably given quite a long answer there, but it's important for me that within our identification structure, I'm confident that our guys look for a variety of different things, but within the actual recruitment phase of it, what we want is application, desire, willingness to learn, and a lot of things that actually you can't see by standing at the side of the pitch. And actually these things now are becoming more and more important for us. That the multi-million-dollar question, I think, is talked about the sort of ages and stages. How can you take an 8-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, put them through a 10-year development programme and have a good aspect of thinking we're going to make a first team player out of this player. So Eddie Mays and works with colleagues are Nathan Rings now in charge of sports science and medicine. We've got a very good analyst in Calvin Charlton, so there's a good learning environment there. There's a good different things for the players to work on while they're with us. But unless the individual has these things within them, willingness to learn, an application, a desire, a willingness to go and make themselves the best they can, sometimes it's maybe a wee bit less relevant, the attributes they show when they're 8. If they've not got that, then they're highly unlikely to go and continue through a process like that.
It's like the interviews you see where I don't know, maybe taking a bit off piece, we're looking at top athletes, Olympians or rugby players or footballers, as they all say there's one trend along with when they ask what makes them successful, and it's hard work. Loving the sport, loving the thing that they do, and putting in as much effort and time that they can possibly manage.
I think that's something that I've always found quite interesting about the way America does it with the college system. Is you have these players who are maybe amazing at their high school, so they get taken to college, but then they find out they don't really love the sport they're doing, so they won't get taken on by a professional team.
A lot of them actually change sports, so they've got quite a good multi-sport culture whereby if they've got a particular, so for example, someone playing American football, and obviously we are talking about your later stages of development, maybe you're 16, 18 years old, and they will know their sprint times. They will know how fast they can move over 10 yards, 20 yards, 15 yards. And if it doesn't work out at American football, they'll say, why don't we try sprinting now? Why don't we try something else? Whatever that may be, and can you use the skill set that you've developed in that sport in another sport? Again, they also do that in recruitment. Going into recruitment, they look at what is the top speeds in NFL, NBA, and then can that player repeat something as close to that as possible within their environment, would be college, university, games, and then they look at what skill sets they've got, which I'm not sure that's the right way to do it. But
you mentioned something though for me, Robbie, you're saying it's going off on a tangent. For me, I don't think it is, because I think that there's maybe a temptation for us as football people to think about creating footballers, but we don't really ever speak about ourselves as creating athletes. You know, and ultimately that's what it is, that within any youth programme, if you can get 1 or 2 players within a team or an age group through into a first team squad and into a first team, that's a success. 1 or 2 individuals out of a squad that might be 10 or 12 or 14 players. And ultimately, if you do the maths on it, if you have any more than that, there's going to be a bottleneck somewhere within the system. So you're never ever going to be able to have, 10 or 12 or 15 players coming through year on year on year. So how can you make every individual as good as he can be? And I think the debate goes, facilities are important, coaching is important, input's important, but there's now coming, I think, more and more into the sort of psyche of the individual and the sort of support network with the family unit and so many other things like that that just help shape that young person, that young player to actually progress through your system. So
I think the multi-sport system, part of it is relevant, and I think for just the roundedness of the child, I don't think we should put their eggs in one basket. I think football, all the young lads that want to be footballers, you've got to prepare for the massive disappointment that's going to come their way. It's almost inevitable, but although you do have the odd exceptions. And I say all my players before they went back on the other side game, I've probably had them for 3-4 years, but then I always say to them, and the parents sitting there, none of you are going to be football players professionally. So we're going to enjoy this, and we're going to enjoy the journey. And what will happen is, I'll train you the 3 nights a week, we'll go interesting trips, and maybe go into the academy and play in the south, and hopefully some in Scotland as well. But at the end of the day, if anything happens, well and good. But we had a player called Ethan Hamilton, who's now with Man United, 3 years there, he's captain of their 18s recently, but he's been in and around the reserve team more often. But when he first came as a 5.5-year-old, he was a swimmer. He was up at full development. And of course, when I changed after the the 2 years at the top school, the 2 years at the kids' school and so on. They played for the Tigers. You know, after that, I changed it to 3 nights because we became an independent age group at that time. We were part of the kids' school system at that point. So we went to 3 nights a week, and his mum was saying, "Oh, he swims now. He still swims. He didn't swim at the same level, but he changed one of his nights as Wednesday night. We were training that night. And I says, well, he still does that. I says it's important for the kid to do what he wants to do, and he'll gravitate to the sport that he wants to." And I think it was maybe the start of the 14 season. He stopped to swimming. And,
It's quite often that kind of age, isn't it?
He found his way, and I think we've got to. You can't be that selfish animal as a coach and think that you always know best and play God with their lives. You've got to have that bit of flexibility, and I think that mindset can also transfer to the player when he's on the pitch. That he's allowed to make decisions. Because I think we've got a senior game now where people didn't want to make decisions. You hear there's no leaders on the park. Well, if they've been brought up as kids in a sat-nav coaching system, then how are they ever going to make decisions if they've never made them as kids? Because if you don't make them as a kid, you're never going to make them as an adult.
I mean, you learn best from your mistakes, don't you? And you talk about you kind of expressing yourself, and that's something we will cover in depth. But just to talk about this multi-sport environment, the one that always comes up to me is Andy Murray. He had to go to Spain to pursue the sport that he really liked, which was tennis, because he got as far as he thought he could do with football, and he maybe thought, there's maybe a 1 in a million chance that I could be a half-decent footballer, but I've got a really good chance of being a great tennis player. I can't do it here. I just think that's a real indictment, and I wonder what guys' opinion is on things like the Orium, or the way that, like Real Madrid have got championship winning basketball teams, Porto's got like a lacrosse team or something like that. Yeah. Do you think the big thing's resources, isn't it? I mean,
it's key, but there are a lot of sports clubs around Edinburgh now. We look at down at Edinburgh City. I helped out with my son's team, 2005 age group, and we for the last 2 years since our son's been involved, and I've been involved in coaching that team. The kids have only trained once a night football, and they've been encouraged to do every other sport they can under the sun. Some of them have taken up the extra training with Hibs and Hearts on occasions and things like that. But there are a bunch of really, really well-rounded kids, and they're not. There's nothing particularly special about the way we've done things with them. It's just that they've had the choice on what and how much they commit to what they want to commit to. And I think that when they turn up to training, you see a big difference in attitude and behaviour from them because of that. They want to be there. And that comes in, Andy Murray made a choice there, and that's important that he actually made the choice and went. Something to do with his mum being junior as well. Might have kind of had the opportunities are there for him as well, but he's made a choice and he went, you know what, I'm going to commit to that and I'm going to move.
It's almost like sacrifice though. I mean, sacrifice. She did that to move to Spain with her son together, and that's probably where we're at in Scotland. If you want to reach the top in all the sports, you've got to be prepared for that extraordinary sacrifice at the expense of everything else. Because the system isn't there really for it to happen otherwise. I mean, you see the schools, there's lots of school football teams that don't exist anymore.
Sorry to interrupt you there, Tam, but I read a statistic from the BBC a month or so ago that rugby's now starting to overtake football in schools.
Yeah, because SRG are doing a better job than the SFA. That's why.
I mean, it's crazy to think that though, isn't it?
They're reaching out. The SFA are concentrating on elitist, and the professional game and elitism. The feed down and the drip down effect in terms of cash isn't there. I don't see why Hearts, Hibs, Rangers and Celtic, for instance, should get money for the SFA or a youth system. They're businesses. If they want a youth system, it should be factored into their money. They should be factored into their business plan. I think clubs like Hutchison, Vale, Edinburgh, Hibs, you call it whatever club, because every club's important at this level for the kids. But them and the schools need that investment. If the schools are not going to do it through educational budgets, they need to do it through sport budgets. And I think the SFA, they need new ideas up there, and they've been needing them for years. And I think they need to get the tentacles out there and stop going on about elitist football and start enriching the grassroots.
No,
because if you don't look after your grassroots, you're not going to get the flowers coming through. It's going to be weeds.
Yep, that's where they start. But I suppose I'll put this over to you guys now because you'll have kind of first-hand experience, and I know that the upcoming kind of Project Brave might put some of that sort of business plan stuff that Tam talked about into kind of action. But I'll put that kind of to you guys. About that resourcing and funding, and at that level. I'll go to you first.
Well, I wouldn't get involved in a debate about academies versus boys club or anything like that. It's obviously, I'm involved with Hearts and other people involved with boys clubs, which is good. You work with what you've got in front of you. I'm based at the Orium. I think the facilities there are brilliant. We were touching on that, it was great. And if you talk about other sports and subjects, when I'm walking out at night time, there's handball on, there's volleyball on. It's getting the participation rates up within different sports within Scotland here. When I talk about the Project Brave or whatever it's going to be, you hope that what they're going to implement at the SFA is going to be worthwhile and beneficial to the young kids and the young coaches. Would be my opinion on it.
There's probably a few facets of that for me, Ryan. I kind of come into this job from a brief spell work with the Scottish FA and the regional staff. And for me, I think that there has been, over the last number of years, a huge people resource now in working within the non-professional game. And I think that lends itself to actually running schools of football, aside from the performance schools. Looking at the infrastructure of a youth club, so in terms of facilities, in terms of coach education, in terms of all the various things like that. So, you know, I do think there has been investment made in the grassroots game, and I think actually when you look at the facilities that are now available, some clubs even owning them themselves. I remember my boys club in Prestwick when I was young, they had an AstroTurf pitch. It probably was the size of this table. You know, when I talk about AstroTurf, it was a green carpet. It was revolutionary.
And that was lucky, because if it wasn't that,
absolutely.
it was blaze.
Somebody's dad's car light shining on it instead of floodlights. And that was absolutely seen as being something totally out of the ordinary. So to move from that to where we are just now, I think is huge. I think the conversations about Project Brave and the kind of structure of what we're trying to do, I'll always be there. The difficulty is always going to be at what point do you know whether it is working or it isn't working, you know, because we seem to, in Scotland, whenever the national team, unfortunately, doesn't get a great result, the grassroots game and the youth game and the youth academies need ripped upside again, you know, whereas if the national team win, then that debate doesn't happen for another until the next round fixture. So I think we do need to be careful on that, but I take Tam's point on board in the respect that, for me, the conversation about Project Brave and the national framework needs to feed into the youth club framework as well.
Because I know Mark Mackay's had discussions with a lot of the 42 SPFL clubs, but I don't know if it's extended down to grassroots.
Well, at the same time, it's not his remit. Ultimately, and the way the game's governed, it's not his remit, because the Scottish FA would look after the professional clubs, the Scottish Youth FA look after the youth clubs, and I think just to touch on Tam's point about funding, within Project Brave, each individual club will actually have to invest percentage-wise more money than on a youth academy than they ever have done before. Although they stand to actually receive more money, in percentage terms they need to invest more to get more out of that. So what the headline part of it is saying, if we've got less number of academies working with less number of players, we're channeling potentially more money into the elite, as we would say. And in many ways, guys, I'll be honest, I was there the last time Scotland played in the World Cup in 1998, and every time I sit in the summer with my kids, they ask me, why is Scotland not playing like that? When's Scotland playing in this tournament? So I do think there needs to be a lot focused in on that, because every other sport has a very, very clear talent progression and talent pathway, whereas in football, probably because we start with such a big base, it becomes muddied at certain stages. And I take Tam's point on board that the professional clubs, and ourselves included, absolutely need to be doing more to try and get young players through and get them into first teams, and ultimately for us, get them into Scotland international team. We need to be doing more in that. But I think the conversation about, you know, we should be looking at this as a collective. It shouldn't be about professional clubs do this and boys clubs do this and they get that and we get that. It should be all together. Because my concern with it is, if the numbers in the Club Academy Scotland framework reduce, where do they go?
Yeah.
Is there now going to be 100 kids in Edinburgh chatting Tamsdale saying there's any chance of a game? Does he have the number of coaches to facilitate it, the number of pitches, the number of kit and equipment, etc, etc? And if he does that mean that 100 players leave his club to go somewhere else, and so on and so on, and end up we lose somebody from the game at some point as it cascades down? So, you know, I know that was a really long-winded answer, and forgive me, but I think this is all the
subject.
I agree.
It's a long-winded answer.
I agree, obviously. I think there is some facilities there. A lot of the new high schools have great 3G Astros, but the problem is, Tim will probably tell you how much it is to rent one of the AstroTurfs out for a night. Now, if you've got 4 or 5 teams trying to take a full pitch, especially places like Orem, it's going to cost a fortune. It's all right for the bigger grassroots teams, but you've got some new teams in my area as well that are just starting out that can't afford to pay them. They're doing fundraisers on Friday nights to try and raise money to last for the next.
Been a race night,
exactly, to last for the next. So I think there is facilities there. I think it's just helping teams be able to afford to train on their parks.
And we'll bring this back now to kind of the everyday kind of things of being a coach. And Declan, we'll go to you first. What are the common mistakes made by grassroots coaches and coaches at the academy level in training and the matchday environment?
In the matchday environment is the amount of coaches focus on winning. And I think it needs to be development first, how the individuals are performing collectively as well. I've been along to boys club games and coaches shouting and barking orders for the side. The kids then become scared to make mistakes. They're too structured what they're doing, and we want them to be able to express themselves, make those mistakes which they'll learn from and develop as players. Within Hearts, with the Mathie, if we play well and lose, it's a good day, as long as the players have done the right things like I've asked them to do, and they played well and worked hard. At boys club and grassroots, I think winning is far too much. I think it's right across Scotland. I think if they take that out in their game day and they start training on the things that are relevant to their team, if they prepare, they're confident and they give the right information and they're knowledgeable with their players, it will start to progress the grassroots game and the academy game. But it's the winning mentality thing at young ages.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys agree with that, or do you think that the focus on winning is correct? Or
I don't know, it's a hard one. I think it's about educating coaches as well. It's hard because the grassroots coaches give up a lot of their time for free. So it's hard to sit there and say they should be doing this, they should be doing that. A lot of coaches do care about winning, which probably more than the players. The players will probably tell you 5 minutes after the game they'll have thought about the result, whereas coaches maybe think about it more. As I say, it's hard. I think it's just about coach education. Even though at grassroots level, when you're planning training sessions, doing the right things, stuff not to do, I think I hate seeing personally big, massive possession areas on half a pitch where, as I say, kids are touching the ball every 5 minutes. But again, it's you can't.
I don't actually want to name drop here, but there's a local team near where I stay, and I think it's 2006, and to finish their training session, they have an Alabama-side game on an Alabama-side park. 2006.
But then, as I say, that's hard because it's about educating these coaches to do, this is what you should be doing, this is, and that obviously takes time and money as well. They're out in the winter doing it for free on a Tuesday, Wednesday night, so it's hard to say, but it's about educating them properly.
With the volunteers, they should always be encouraged. Everybody wants to win. If I'm playing badminton with a friend that I want to win, but it's doing things in the right manner and teaching them the right principles, process. But information is huge. I don't know if that comes down to the coach education system, but these volunteers need to be encouraged in the right manner, so the information they're giving to their players is the right information, rather than something that's not going to benefit them as a person and as a player.
I've been based at Foresters now for the best part of 2 and a bit years on with the O5s and the under 20s, and actually I've seen a lot of good sessions on. I've seen a lot of enthusiasm for coaches, and I've seen a lot of well prepared, and I think that's for me one of the keys, is being prepared with what you're delivering. Which actually is the hardest thing as a coach, is turning up sometimes is the easiest thing, because it's very easy to get into your working life of I'm here at 6 o'clock and I do that. But actually planning, and it comes in part of the questions later on, the planning aspect of what we're working on, how we're going to work on it, why are we developing this skill and all this skill. But Jimmy over here needs this skill developed, and Michael needs it. And it's an absolute minefield for basically volunteers who, in most part, are also parents. They work, and it's a massive commitment. But I take my hat off to a lot of them, because I've seen a lot more good sessions than I've seen poor sessions. I have seen sessions maybe based on information that's not correct, if that makes sense, maybe longer runs and all this kind of stuff. But again, that comes down to what you're saying about education. And what information is it, because there is a lot of information out there now. The internet's helped a wee bit, but it's also made things a lot harder.
Sorry, when you go ahead.
No, it's right. I think it's really interesting for me, this is in Scotland we seem to maybe take the two things separately, that in order to develop players we can't focus on winning, and if we do focus on winning we don't develop players. I'm not convinced that's the case. Actually, in the story I remember, one of my first experiences working at a club was at Celtic with Martin Miller, who I regard as one of the best youth coaches I've ever worked with. And I remember being in the first game situation, and he told a group of 9 and 10-year-old boys winning was important, the result was important. And it took me back a wee bit. I'm not really quite sure how I feel about this, but it was the way he delivered his message both in the games and the coaching sessions. And two examples I've got. One, James Forrest's little brother Alan, who's now a United player in the first team. We played a game away to St Mirren, we were drawn 1 each, 7-a-side football. You know, the environment there was great, parents applauded things, there was no batting orders for the side of the pitch for either team, great game. 1 each getting into the last 30 seconds of the match. So Alan, as a centre midfielder, takes the ball from the goalie, gives it to the wide player takes on the defender, he cuts the ball back. Alan Forrest has sprinted the length of the pitch and slide tackled 2 people in the goals to put the ball in the back of the net because winning was important to him. Now, if winning wasn't important, I'm fairly sure Alan would have done great and getting the ball for the goalie, giving it to the wide player and thinking my job's done, happy with that. But he had that wee bit in him that said, I'm going to go and score the goal. But the most important thing for me, sorry Declan,
It's balancing.
Absolutely, but the most important thing for me in that environment was, even when they didn't win, that was when it became important to teach them why they didn't win and how the next time they came. It wasn't about focusing on the result at that point. It was taking the result and saying we tried our best, we were determined to win, we focused on it, we wanted to win the game, but we didn't. Why not? Okay, this happened, that happened, how can we make it better the next time? And make sure that the result at that point wasn't the most important thing, but before the game it was. And that's really difficult balance to
You do your
get.
training sessions and you pair them up and you do them 1v1s or that team against that team, you still want to win. There's no way that you're taking out.
You have competition.
You make it a competition,
Yeah.
and then even when they go to Saturdays, they still want to win. But it's 5 minutes after that, do they know why they've not won? And it's gone, it's forgotten about, and they take that in the next week.
It's when you watch games and the players are scared to make mistakes because they win. That's when it's the wrong information, it's the wrong balance bit. Because
That could be the way it's delivered, doesn't it? You're
Well,
scared
it's
to
definitely the way
You plan your training from however you didn't win and you take the points across, but you want to win every game, you want to do it in the right manner, but you never affect the players' personalities and the way they are and expressing themselves by through doing it. So I think balance is key for what you said, Graeme.
The
Balance
thing
is
with the stages there is that you look at whether the kid can handle the information, because also that comes back to your growth maturation stages again and their ability levels, because sometimes they do just play because they're playing with their pals. Other times they're not, they're playing because they want to be there, they want to win the game. And I think the 2 key questions are is, how do you win? What is it you have to do as an individual and as a teammate to help your team win? And then ultimately you then help them focus on, well, I need to play well, how do I play well? And you just, you know, and all of a sudden, and some age groups, some of the more developed players actually give you the answers to these questions, which is really what you're after. And then we talk about certain older players doing the same after performances as well now. Well, what did you learn from that environment? What did you learn from playing against that player who was elbowing you or trying to move you the road because he wanted that a bit more? And all of a sudden you've got to learn an environment that suits the players that do make it to the top level.
So, just working our last point before we go to some questions and talking about a good learning environment, put it to all of you guys, when you're planning a training session, go to you first, Ross, what are your golden rules? I know one of you mentioned earlier is need cues.
I hate seeing big queues where they're getting a shot once every 5 minutes, they get their ball, they join the back of the queue again, they've had 1 touch, and all of our sessions are designed to maximise touches. We think that's the only way you can get better, the only way you work on technique. Even we're inside at the minute, we're using the walls. You'll touch the ball 30 times in 30 seconds and it off a wall. That's more than you're getting any other drill. So when we plan our sessions, it's all structured to maximise touches because we believe that's the only way that you're going to get better at that age, especially from 5 to 12. And that's all we believe that you should be focusing on.
No, so sorry, so Tam, obviously you've a lot of different age groups you've worked with, so is there anything that's always been constant throughout that's a golden rule when you're thinking about it?
I think there's building blocks, you know, it's like education at school, you don't get taught about percentages until you know about your 1v1 and 1's 2, and you build for the bottom and you build up the bank and knowledge. I agree with Ross about the touches and technique. I think 5 to 12 golden age level really, like sponges at that age. We have the badge systems, white, start fight, so many fast food works, you can do them to a certain level and get the white badge, we'll just give them away. Then you work through your blue and your green, and then when you come to the next ones up, it's red and black, you've got to implement the skills in a game environment, the training, and get 2 of the middle for that. Then the last 2 is like a combination, it's like timed, it's working, running, ball with the left foot when the defender's on that side, the defender switches that side, switch feet. All these techniques are rather in development the players. So it depends what level they're at, but the very young ones, I agree that the technique's very important. But I think the most important thing is the coaches that you have, because I always see myself as a role model, and how I behave dictates how the players behave. If I behave like an idiot at touchline, then the players behave like idiots. It's not just about how you win, it's how you lose, and all these things are important. I know a couple of times I've lost games at 11 sides. I've phoned up another coach and congratulated him. There's maybe a certain aspect to his tactical knowledge that done us on the day, and you phone them up. It's not war. When he create the war. Whether a boy falls down at my feet with a green jersey or a marine jersey, he's a kid at the end of the day. And we've got to get ourselves out of this parochial nonsense at times, which feeds into the kids.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you see it all the time. If there's a bad sideline, there's
bad behaviour on the park. And you know, we've touched upon the solid dads. They put in that position, unfortunately. And that's where we're again about investment. Why should parents be put in the position where they're going to take the football team? We didn't do that at Hutch. I try not to have parents. We have got one or two parents involved in soccer service, because the ones that you do get, we like to take 11 aside football because they want to win the game. Because the good of their weekend depends on a football result on a Saturday afternoon or Sunday morning. It's pathetic. It is a bit of lack of education and maybe a lack of involvement in other areas in life. But I think there's a whole cultural problem there, that particular subject. But I think investment's the name of the game. Investment in schools, investment in grassroots football. I mean, I would love some money from the SFA or somebody so that I can then go and pick coaches to take my teams. Sometimes you're making the best of the volunteers that are available. And I don't always just take anybody at Hutchison. It's about having that cool head inside of the park. Because these kids are somebody's kids, you know, and you've got to treat them with respect and you've got to treat them the right way. And that's been my mantra all the way through Hutchison. And I've taken teams now for 31 years at Hutchison, and the 7 years I had before, I went to look at that all day. When I was a young policeman in Hilton, I was involved with the local football team in there. Well, running a football team we created where Spartans are now on record. And I've never been spoken to once by a referee outside your park. And the reason that is because if I get spoken to by a referee, I lose all credibility as a figurehead or as a role model, and that's important.
I mean, all coaches are role models, but at Hart's, Declan, and at your academy as well, what's your kind of golden rule for a training session?
For training sessions, well, the coach is always important what he does. He's got to be energetic, enthusiastic, knowledgeable, and gives the right information to the players. Role model, like Tam said, is very important. I'd like to see myself as a role model as well with the kids. The way I behave represents the club, represents the players, and the way they behave as well. So it's trying to create that togetherness and unity with it, and having those standards within our behaviour and our application. I take real pride within my team when we're away games, home games, the way we behave and carry ourselves out. I take it as a reflection of myself and the club and what the academy is trying to implement throughout. Roger Arnott and Craig Levine, Director of Football, have got really good with their philosophy and structure, and it feeds right through to every team. Every coach buys into the philosophy and ethos, and so do the players, which I think is vitally important to running our club.
So keep the questions coming in. We're going to go to some questions now with Robbie over there from email and from Facebook. So keep them coming in. Robbie, what are some of the things that have been coming up so far?
Yeah, lots of good questions, Ryan. First one, which actually came in from Ireland, Ronan Malloy. Could there be opportunities for coaching staff from some of the grassroots clubs to go to the bigger clubs or academy clubs on a sort of form of internship to go away and develop themselves as a coach?
So we'll go straight away to Tam. Would you be up for that? Would you want to go into another club? And do you guys, would you be on board with having guys maybe like shadowing from your players?
Of course, I think that's what's wrong, that parochialness. I think if the name of the game is about the child and the development of the kid, then I know if I was in charge of Hibs and Hearts, I'd be having much closer ties to the boys' clubs and putting the hand out a wee bit more tangibly and getting them in. I certainly would be doing that.
I think we've one of our probably key appointments in our whole academy structure has been a guy actually from the local grassroots game. And the story was that we worked really well with him, with one of the players in his team we wanted to recruit. we made a sort of gentleman's agreement, a commitment not to recruit the players during the season, and in return for that he then said that as of that day, that, you know, an agreement with the player's family that any other approaches for the kid would be not bad. So as it turned out, he left the club and we brought him into our academy. That's what he does now on a regular basis, is bring in coaches into the academy to actually watch what's going on. So already, Alan Stubbs last year did a CPD event at Christmas time, which all the local pubs were invited to come along. I thought actually it would probably be, you know, standing room only in the place, but sadly there was only about 20-25 coaches that took it up on that.
I think it was the date.
Well,
I think that was the date.
Yeah.
I think you could have Christmas party that day for the children.
You're never going to get, it's never going to suit everybody. That is it. And you look at, there's actually coach educational as we speak, isn't there, over at Oriel, which is apparently being very well attended. But in terms of that, I think coach mentorship, having coached for 17, nearly 18 years, coach mentorship's been a massive part of my development before I decided to go back to university and stuff like that. It's just to remember the wee bits that you learn from quite a lot of often to pick up other people's cones at things and go, that can I just watch? Can I just take in what you've got to say and what you've got to do? And I think that would actually help with the philosophy, professional clubs as well, because they are a lot more dedicated to the philosophy and how they want players to be developed. It's obviously a good thing for the kids to know what's expected of them, because the expectation levels are then known. But that's certainly, I think that's a great idea, and I received that email last year as well, and I think it's definitely a very worthwhile thought of how do we mentor coaches, how do we help them.
Coach education is something we're going to come on to in some depth. We'll stop for a quick break. We'll be back in just about 30 seconds to a minute. Allow all the guys here to refill their glasses of water. So do stay tuned, stay involved with your questions. You can keep up to date on Twitter as well, at YFS TV. Questions for the panel to debateshow at youthfootballscotland.co.uk. And of course, if you're on the Facebook page and you're watching the live stream, leave your comments, leave your statements at the bottom. So we'll be back just in 30 seconds with the second half of the YFS debate show. Good evening and welcome back to the second half of the YFS live debate show, joined here by a very illustrious, successful panel: Graeme, Mathie, Declan, Fergus, Rob, Hart, Ross Gray and Tam from Vale. Tam from Vale, I just love the ring that's got. Now, we were talking just before the break there about coach education, and we've got a question here. What do you make of the current coach education options that are out there? What would you recommend for an aspiring coach trying to develop their ability? And I'll go to Ross for that first.
As I say, there is a lot of CPD events that the SFA hold. There's one on tonight for early touches, what I think would be brilliant. It's wee street games that I think will benefit a lot of coaches, especially for the younger teams. So it's just about having a look online and seeing that there is actually stuff out there that you can go and look at, you can go and attend.
And Declan, what about yourself? Obviously you're on academy too.
Well, on a bigger scale of things, I always hear about trying to implement the Spanish structure or the German or Dutch, whatever it is. I think we should implement our own, create our own. Why not have the Scottish coach education other people want to copy? I think it just takes a wee bit of self-belief from the clubs, the coaches, the players, believe in ourselves and what we're going to do, and then take that on to the next level. I think the reason why Scotland have never reached a major tournament in so long is because they lack a world-class player. If you look at Wales and Poland, who were in a group, Poland have Lewandowski and Wales have Gareth Bale. So we need to try and create a world-class player through our coaching system to then qualify for these major tournaments. But I would like to be the Scottish way, not the Dutch way or the German way.
Why do we not create?
Yeah, this was something that we were going to bring up earlier, but we bring it in now, is that you guys have the opinion that we should be cherry picking from other successful countries, or should we solely rely on our own ideas?
Well, I think you can take best practice for different countries, because there's definitely good facets. And you can't reinvent the wheel with football. There's limitations. I mean, you can't keep going in circles, but there's good practice in these countries. And I agree with Declan. The young lads, and it's noticeable, the young lads have got that really refreshing sort of, and I think there's not enough youngsters getting an input in the ideas. I think that's important. They see the way forward. They're living a lifetime now where they've never seen Scotland in a major tournament. At least me and Graeme at least saw the right game.
That's going for the resilient.
I think we've got the intelligence and the capabilities here of producing some Scottish philosophy based on our own value base. And sometimes we're not the game too much in Scotland. You know, there's still things about the biggest per-headed population per capita. We're still the best spectator rate in Europe. It's incredible. And people say the product's rubbish. Well, the product could be improved, of course. It takes maybe people coming together. There was a comment made earlier about Malky Mackay not being his remit. Well, you know, Malky's maybe come off the perch and make it his remit, and at least come down and see what it's like at grassroots, whether it's his remit or not. I mean, if you're interested in football that much, you would want to know what's going on everywhere, not just in the 42 or so academies that are on the bounds.
Yes, a fair point, and if people agree,
It's
by all
about
means.
people like that, breaking away from the staid, that's my role and that's my job description mentality. But why be thinking outside the box? A lot of people say to me, what do you think of that you Catherine getting a job at Hearts? And I'm saying, how? For young. I said, well, maybe that's what's wrong. Maybe why do we not give youth a chance?
It was ridiculous, actually. The
And
kind of
it was a
feeling
bit
around
thrilling,
it.
and I really hope he does well to shut people up.
Yeah.
I really do. Now, I sarcastically says, well, it's no surprise, is it? Because we didn't give youth a chance in this country anyway. If you look at the way we treat our children, look at the lack of investment in sport. If you go to a private school, well and good. I says, but overall, the investment in youth is terrible. And it's always been. So why are you going to give a young manager a chance when you can't even give young players a chance? And I think it's a terrible indictment on us, that curmudgeonly bit of the Scottish psyche. You know, that if something's good, there's going to be a catch. Can it not just be good? Let's speed things up a wee bit and let's give youth a chance. And let's get them into Hampden and start getting some of the jobs in there. I'm not talking about 20-year-olds, but certainly some of the guys that have been there too long in my book. And they've had 30, 40 years to do something, and they've done nothing, or they've done very little, or they've not made it, they've not had an end product from it, let's put it like that. So maybe it needs new people.
No, you go there,
I was just going to say, for me, seeing Ian Cathro appointed at Hart, the club I work at, it was brilliant news. I thought that's what
you could be manager in a few years, mate.
that's what you've got to aspire to be, it's what you've got to try and emulate. So seeing it happen at first team level, him being the head coach, and me working under him as part of the club, was great. And I completely agree with Tam's points that if he's good enough, he's old enough, he's young enough, whatever it matters to be, it's good.
I mean, that's what coach education is. It doesn't matter how old you are, if you're educated properly. And we've got an article here from the BBC from when Malky Mackay was just appointed at the SFA, and he said that our coach education programme is second to none, but what we're not good at is coach mentoring, and that's something we spoke about earlier, is mentoring coaches. Is that something that you think doesn't happen enough here?
It goes to what recommendations would you have for coaches starting up, is watch as many sessions as you possibly have time for. Again, pick up clones for other people if they've got more experience and you've just observed, you might choose to do it a completely different way. But you're still, like we said earlier on about kids being sponges, as parents, as coaches, we need to be almost of a similar mindset. And I'd also say as well, and it's very, very difficult, the kind of time constraints, but stay ahead of the game in terms of your coach education. So if you've done your 1.1 and your kids are still at that level, try and do the 1.2 before it's required, so that you know what the next stages of development are for the kid. I think sometimes we're off the habit, mate, it's catch up, so the kids move up in age and stage, and then all of a sudden you've got a clamour for people to get on the 1.2 and 1.3. And try and organise yourself. And actually, I'm not putting the responsibility on the coaches and individuals. The club should be doing this with you. The club should have an appointed person who just looks at that for that specific reason. And it's only going to take up 20 minutes of your time every now and again to send you an email. Somebody gets a notification for the SFA or sees it on Twitter or on social media somewhere, on the website, and right, who wants to put their name down for this? And I don't know how much he does it, Tam, but I do think that engagement of the coaches is key. And the parents ultimately. Yeah,
I mean, I know clubs that do that sort of thing. They'll fund. I know that, speaking from personal experience, having a lot of involvement with Bonnet and Thistle and Kilmarnock, they will fund coach education courses. Are you?
We do that, yeah. We actually try and do from B's as well for them. We paid 1,300 to a 1,900 course not long ago. And only it's feast and famine actually. If we've got the money, we do what we can. We've got it in our rules that actually if you're 16-year-old and you're a player, we'll put any player through it.
Well, yeah,
We'll
we'll say do that.
Because we've got the pathway right through for girls and boys, so any girl or boy 16 who wants to do coaching. And we're hoping, of course, that we get players coming back. Jonathan Brown coming back, who went to Hart for the team I had, under 17s, I think he was player of the year. Bad ankles, he's playing with Bonnie Rosenthal, he's coming back to help the kids' school because he went through that. And I think that's great, and that's what you want the young players to come back. If the circumstances are obviously right for them. Well, I'd love to give them expenses, I'd love to have some sort of fund where I could do that. But also the coaching, as you say, if the coaches are getting better educated, then that good practice filters down to the children. So
I think that goes to the do you look at other countries for best practices, and I think you do. Do we coin it the Spanish way, the Belgian way, or whatnot? I was at CPD not long ago last year, and they had the guys that take the under-17s for Belgium, and they've got fairly important jobs with the Belgian FA, and a lot of ideas were absolutely brand new. They were fantastic in terms of youth development and creating environments for your early and late developers. And there's been a lot about that. Southampton do a lot of that as well. I think Hibs have done a wee bit as well with the kind of maturation age children, putting them into games where they're playing against players that are of the same physical kind of stature and size, and vice versa. So it's important to look for best practices, and I think the SFA do that, to be honest with you. There's been a lot of working parties that go over to Benfica.
there's a lot of good work goes on, yeah, definitely.
Exactly, there's a lot of good, but it's that plan of action then. Where does it go after that? Where do these ideas go? And then how do we implement them? And I have to say, I think that one of the most important things is how do you implement them at grassroots as well as your professional clubs? Because that's where most of the players are based.
That's where the players come from.
Well, that's where all players come from initially. So how do we kind of not affect it, but how do we lead that?
So we spoke about training sessions earlier with golden rules and some of the mistakes that coaches make, but in terms of a longer term training plan, when you're writing up that A4 sheet of paper for a training session, that's you thinking of maybe one night, but really we should be thinking 3 or 6 months down the line. And how does that go on with yourself, Declan, at your academy and at Hearts?
We can do it in blocks of 6 weeks and try to mix up. We focus on certain principles or certain aspects of play. I mean, repetition is important, but so is variation. So if you're working on a certain aspect, finding other ways of working on it through the period so the kids are still engaged with what you're delivering rather than becoming bored and restless. So repetition and variation, getting the balance on, even though it's almost the opposite, is important within it. But 6 week period at times what we focus on. We've got attacking and defensive principles at Hearts, a ratio of working on some, 3 attacking and then a defensive one. So again, it's the variation with it.
What would be some of your advice for a grassroots coach who's maybe just passed at 1.2 or something like that, maybe hasn't had the experience of doing this, but how can he or she make it easier to cope with that? And Tab, probably you in that as well.
Well, again, it's trying to plan for that long term, looking at each players, what's useful for them individually and collectively, trying to think on his own feet, being innovative with it, and then planning for there. But it can be difficult if you say he's only got his 1.1, he's not went through the education system in Scotland, so it's upon himself. So it leaves it to him, it's his responsibility, which can either go really well or not so well. It's a difficult one.
Tam, long term, obviously, it's something that you say, we're always going to plan for 3 to 6 months down the line, but with volunteer coaches, you've got guys, women just come straight from their work, and maybe get a session plan up in the half an hour they've got spare, go for their dinner down. How do you try and think, right, this is what I want us to do just now, but by the time we get to mid-season, this is where I want us to be? What advice could you
give? In terms of the coaches' training, you mean? Yeah. Well, I mean, it's obviously, you've got to look at the weather conditions, the surface you've got. I mean, a lot is astroturf, so we've got Vale, no party to any of these hubs there. Well, that's why we've been forced to go to the Oriole and play these matches, because we've got 21 different venues for our teams, which is an administrative nightmare, I would say. So we might be training at Forge Road one night, which is very heavy. You've trained there, Declan, before. You can have Forge Road, right? The light's not great, he does crap on the pitch. That's one of the things.
You Edinburgh folk can't talk about bad parts you played on Blaze.
Go early, make sure there's no dogs crap on the back. So there's all these wee things that you've got to look at. I mean, obviously I didn't have passing jobs on glue pot, conditions. So you've just got to make sure that the conditions are right for what you're trying to deliver. variation and repetition, obviously, But there's going to be a plan, because as the kids move older, it's like being at school. You've got to make sure that the training's commensurate with that age and stage of development. Technique is everything at young age groups, putting the basics in terms of the roles and responsibilities and the positions of play. I'm a big believer in the two-footedness stuff. I think if they get in at these ages, it's very difficult. I like stuff like the corver, I think that's good stuff. Because that's all the fast footwork stuff that we preach as well at the young age groups. And then you go through there to learn they'll do for the individual role and responsibility in the team framework. You then go through phases of play with the team, both in the attacking context and in the defending context of the games as well. And you've got to go over it and over it, and then you go into specifics like defending corners, or defending free kicks, or the wee rules that go with that. And of course taking them. And then you ask, I always say that the kids have been practicing free kicks already to do that particular part, and they come up with one and they hand it in. So it's like a bit of homework I'm thinking about it. It's amazing what they come up with. So involve the kids. Make sure you're having fun as well. That's important. There's a fun element to everything that you do. But make sure that you're pushing the kids as well in terms of what their capability is, and you're taking them a level up as the coach. Didn't overstretch it.
I'd always say enjoyment and development, the two of them, they've got to develop, they've got to enjoy themselves, so you balance the two of them, they're doing a good job there.
If you're enjoying it, you're enjoying it as a coach.
Exactly, yeah.
Be prepared for breakdowns in your sessions, because if you're making it challenging, if it's going to stay fun, then the session might break down, and that's not a slate on you as a coach or what you've planned or delivered from. That's just mistakes happen, and because I do think that's one of the key things is make it fun. When you ask yourself when you planned it, is that fun? Is it challenging enough? And then remind yourself that the be all and end all isn't the drill or the exercise, the activity looking magnificent and never breaking down. In fact, actually breaking down is a good sign at times. Do you know what I mean? And then can you throw in a question to them then? Can you ask them, well, how are you going to work this situation out? What are you going to do next? What would you do next time? I think that's a very, very vital one, that if you're going to challenge them, which I totally agree with, just bear in mind when it does break down, because it will break down if you're challenging them, then they'll learn from it. As long as you react the right way, you stay that role model, you stay that enthusiastic person, then they'll...
I think as well it's noticing when to progress it. Where they are ability-wise, right, they're finding this too easy. Next time we come to this, whatever aspect it is we're doing, we're going to have to progress the drill. If it's too hard, we bring it back down again. So it's just noticing where your players are as well and trying to...
So if you've got like a 3-month block, and after a month the players aren't where you want to be, would you just advise sticking with the current before it?
Just revisit.
Just keep going.
I mean, you can change your drills a wee bit. You don't have to do the exact same drills, but make them the same level of difficulty as what it was before until they're... Because if you stick them in something that's too hard, it's only going to ruin their confidence. So just keep at it. Eventually they will get it, and that's when you start to slowly progress it.
I mean, it's definitely, you need to be prepared for drills to break down, even before they start. I mean, as a coach myself, we had a guy coming on board to help the team that I coach the other night. He said, I knew I'd planned for 14 boys. Oh, that's my step number one. It's banking and getting the amount of number of boys that you want. You've got to be able to improvise.
Think on your feet a lot as well.
So the magic floor comes in handy.
And Graeme, just to kind of go back, your training period that you call it, I suppose the trial period, how is that planned, and how long do you say it was for again? Was it?
It can be an indefinite period. Then what we want to do is take away from this concept that a kid's coming in for a trial, because I think in my mind I have this thought process. A kid comes in for the first 2 weeks, he's getting to know everything. It's a new environment, everything's very different. The middle 2 weeks they're probably starting to get a wee bit more comfortable, starting to show you what they've got, and then the final 2 weeks are starting to worry about whether they're getting a yes or a no. So we take that away. And we've actually, in most cases, it's been quite a positive working relationship with the local clubs as well, that we're not going to them and saying, we want your kid 3 nights a week for 6 weeks, and then we'll tell you at the end whether he's in or he's out. He's actually able to go and stay in his own environment and come to us periodically. There might be a night, might be 2 nights, and we work that through there. So, just touching on what some of the guys were talking about training sessions and what we're looking for, a lot of the big kind of thinking now is coming in towards decision making. And actually training sessions that can encourage players to make decisions, which is absolutely where you're going to get a lot of mistakes.
You were saying that about expressing yourself,
that's what you want.
I think that's now becoming a bigger and bigger part. How do you help players make the right decisions, and actually how do you identify what the right decision is? Because we had a conversation recently at one of the first team games. Player makes a pass, it gets cut out, and then ends up with a chance for the opposition. Now, is it a bad decision to play the pass, or is the pass just been executed poorly? And if the pass had been executed well, then we're actually in another chance to go and score a goal. So it's so fine lines.
Good defender.
See, I agree with that as well. That's why the kids will find it themselves eventually, because they'll say we'll tell them to go and do a trick. If they can't do it, eventually they'll learn to pass it. You don't have to scream and shout at them at the sidelines. Eventually they'll make up their own mind and they'll find the right decisions.
So just after this we'll go for some more questions over with Robbie, but when we're talking about training sessions, currently I suppose that technique's a focal point for a lot of the coaching right now, you know, as opposed to maybe, I remember even when I was playing, that you had one night for fitness and one night for playing football. But I think those days are kind of long gone now. But from a kind of sports science point of view, Rob, how do you balance the fitness, the sports science, the tactics, and actually just make sure there's enough time for playing the game at the end? Because you, that's a great drill. Well, that's a great drill. That's a great drill. But then there's no time for a game at the end of the session.
Well, research shows that developing kind of football-specific fitness, and we'll go through all of them, it's fairly lengthy list. The best way to do it is small-sided games, and you're then actually hitting the touches on the ball, and you're then hitting the decision-making part of the game. So I actually, I think coming from a coaching background to a sports science background, I view it slightly differently in that it's not a separate thing, it's within the game, because actually all you're trying to do is replicate the demands of the game, and that's where it's only, there's a full stop there. That's it. You're trying to replicate the demands of the game. What are the demands of the game? The demands are changing direction quickly and making decisions quickly.
I mean, why bother doing shuttle runs if in a game you're going to run 5 yards that way, then 5 yards that way anyway?
Sometimes players only they don't make an awful lot of long distance runs. Do you know what I mean? Depends on what league you're in. Some leagues are on a lot longer runs, some strikers have to do a lot of running. So it does depend on the philosophy, the team that you're playing for, but I would highly suggest that any team, particularly, I think it also helps the transition from 7s to 11s. Do you know what I mean? Because if they're used to playing small-sided games where the pass is only 4 or 5 yards away all the time, then that's how they'll play their game. Whereas if they're used to doing switches of play and sprinting 30 yards, then that's how they will play as well. So you get what you put into it on that respect. But I try to deliver all sessions at every single age group on the scientifically, what am I trying to work on here? Right, I might, with the younger age groups, I'm probably going to be looking at running technique and changes the technique of changing direction. Because if you notice, a lot of the younger kids do this little kind of U-turn to change direction, when actually what they want to do is a plant of the foot, drop of the shoulder and a move. Now, how do we do that? You can do that when you're working on a technical session, you can do that when you're working on a session of defending or attacking. And sometimes it's just about telling the kid which part of the foot to plant. When they might start, do you think about when you're going to actually do that? When do you want to change direction in that movement? And start to ask them to actually plan ahead, and then again, you've got the decision making. So it's all one and the other, and it's instead of just looking at what outcome do I want in a footballing term, what outcome do I want from a movement pattern that replicates the game again.
No, I agree. Even when we do one-to-one sessions, you'll find it with ladder work. A lot of the wee kids will be able to go through the ladders leading with their right foot, but when it comes back to doing it with their left foot, they struggle. So it's even just teaching them technique rather than asking them to run.
The technical aspect of that, and then putting them in an environment whereby they have to move their feet in a similar manner while someone's putting them under pressure for something. Because that's speed work, specific speed work, and you can work on technique. But how do I do that in relation to either a ball coming at me, or how do I do that in relationship with the ball being put into that channel and I've got to go and change direction because I thought it was going that way. So that's also key as well, and that's where the small-sided games come in.
Players will tell you what they got more out of it.
Yep.
The small-sided games are running around the park for 10 minutes. And it'll always be the small-sided games.
It's lazy coaching. Why have an astroturf? People who have an astroturf when they're doing shuttles. Why? Yeah, just an astroturf part for that. Yeah, I think it's just lazy coaching. And
lack of knowledge, to be honest, lack of awareness, lack of knowledge, lack of education.
Well, that's exactly that. Exactly that.
Support.
Obviously, from the kind of club academy side of things, I don't imagine there's a fitness night, you know, and then night for ball work, as I remember. But how is sports science and that incorporated into the club academy game? And Graeme as well, when you're looking at talent identification and things like that, when you're looking at a player, if you saw someone with, you know, abundance of talent on the ball but he was lacking mobility, is that can't take him?
No, I think there's always aspects, and I think this is the key thing for us as an identification department, is to identify a player's strengths and their weaknesses. And if you split it into the sort of physical, mental, emotional, tactical, technical, etc., all these different components, then they will of course be stronger in some aspects and not as strong in others. Our sports science department, one of the guys here in particular has done a great piece of work in looking at growth and maturation, which has actually changed the way we are able to now make decisions on our players. So one player in a certain age group, and this is where the bio-banding conversation for me becomes quite interesting, that his performances on the pitch are fine, they're not causing any great issue, but they're certainly no amongst the top in the group. His sports science results are the same, they're just very average. But if you take that player and put him into the band that he should be for his physical growth and maturation, he's excelling. So the decision now is the easiest thing would be to say, well, actually he should be playing down in age group, because then he'll start to, and his performances will improve. But the coaching staff have made the decision, rightly in my opinion, to keep him where he is, because he's been pushed and challenged every single week. And the key thing in that is that now the decision, there's not going to be any decision made about that player until he's 16. He's now just 13 and a half. So it's that's changed.
What can happen there, can't it?
It's definitely changed from what it was even when I was younger. You see it with boys that were 14, 15, 12 at the time, they're going to be the next big thing. By the time they're 14 and 15 and everyone else has caught up with them,
absolutely,
that's when they struggle with the rest of their game.
Which is, can I go to grassroots, which is where there's a problem, because you can't do that in grassroots. You can't put a player up without a lot of registration problems, and even then you need X amount of permission. So, maybe a separate chat, but there's certainly something that we've looked at within Edinburgh City. There are players that I feel would benefit from moving up for 6 games, because the 7-a-side game is too easy for them at the moment, or the 4v4s is too easy for the moment, so can you move them up? Yeah. The difficulty you have with that is always no registered there. How you go about dealing with that, I don't know, I've not got enough.
That's what it's easier for us. Obviously we do additional training, so we can say, no, you can show up then with that night, and it pushes them, and sometimes they enjoy it more, and they'll say, can I go back in that, because they find it more a challenge. If they struggle, then they just move back down. As I say, it's a lot easier for us because we're not worried about matches, so we can train them.
Yeah, we do academies. The ones that we feel are ready to go up in terms of physicality and ability, they'll go up, they'll train, they'll play with all their age groups.
Some allowance to that.
So we will do that.
Do you have, is it possible, or even at training sessions, you maybe say to a lad who's doing well with under 13s, do you want to go and train with the 14s for a night?
Yeah, we've done that. I mean, we've got a boy now, 15, who's going to do an extra night, 16, because he's going for a trial in South. So he's making us to become a bit fitter, stuff like that. Yeah.
Enjoying it?
Yeah. The whole reason we had coach teams is because at the end of the kids' school there was 32 players, every age group, so we didn't go to kick 16 out. We've been with us 3-4 years going through the system, so we created a coach team. And some of the coach players actually come good. The 15 will be late mature, they'll mature a bit later. And so, you know, but there seems to be that flexibility, because we have girls football right from the bottom right to the top, and there seems to be that flexibility in the girls team that can move up and down.
Yep.
And I think the guys should learn from that, because I think that would
The girls' team are putting the guys' team to shame, are they not?
I don't know if it would be that, it's just a different system. It's run by the SFA, or it's SFA centred certainly. The SYFA seems to have inherited the old rules of the old Association of Scottish Football Clubs and other ones, Scottish Amateur Association and all that stuff. But I think what people would think outside the box, but there again, the clubs have got the power to get together and change the rules, you know, so the rules could be changed. But that's the difference. Sometimes there's a big difference in sometimes with the rules with pro youth and boys clubs again. I think they should be the same all round. And then if it's all the same, then we can have the same conversations and we can start taking things seriously about how we change the game in the future. You know, that's why I think Malky McCown would be best. You know, it would be great if you could just speak to representatives of the youth grassroots game. Yeah. And I think the same registration process should be for the senior clubs as the boys clubs.
Do you guys see a problem with that?
Standardisation.
Well, them not having it and us having it, I think it makes sense to be the same.
probably take it a stage further. And I think, you know, when I worked in that side of things with the Scottish FA regions, I looked at why should Tam spend so much time and effort building a strong club in Edinburgh and then be restricted to playing against teams in Edinburgh? So if we talk about this Project Brave and we talk about trying to pitch players at a level, if Tam has created an infrastructure and I'm just using him as an example because he's around the table, but if he's created an infrastructure in Edinburgh, are there some of his teams that would benefit by playing in an East Region League? You know, now if there is whatever number somebody decides, but 10, 12, 16, 14 academies, whatever it might be, that play in a national league, you know, should there then be, rather than having a Club Academy Scotland framework, a youth framework, a juveniles and amateurs, or this
The
and
thing
that,
with that is the cost goes up to everybody because you've got travel.
but no everybody, because I think my point there would be that there would be some players within the Edinburgh area, for example, that just want to play in the Edinburgh area, so there's a league there set up for them to go and play at a recreational level, you know, and then going on from that there might be or if it's a local level, an Edinburgh wide level, an East of Scotland level, an East and Central level, whatever it might be, so that teams, players or clubs can go and find a level within the structure.
Like we have the SPFL development league.
Well, you know, at the moment, you know,
Regionalised.
again, with all due respect to what's going on at the minute, you've got your United travelling to Elgin to play a game at youth level. The kids
been there.
to spend more time in the bus than they do on the football pitch.
that's right.
That can't be
I
right.
found that when I worked with County Beath a long time ago, was the amount of time we spent travelling with those kids. Actually, at times, depending on your away fixture, outweighed the amount of time you trained and played.
Absolutely.
And you just think to yourself, what?
We had an outstanding coach years ago in the 80s. He brought me actually with was Paddy Nolan, and he tried to get a Super League with Hutchison, you know, the best couple of teams in Fife and West Lothian. It was before Pro Youth, so that the boys could all have a standard of game that would be more relevant rather than the teams in other different leagues hammering the middle table and the bottom team with double figures. They didn't like the experience. And obviously it wasn't doing much good winning 12-0, and it didn't challenge the players, it didn't challenge the coach. But what happened is the authorities at the time targeted him. They wanted him at the game because they thought he was a threat. In actual fact, he was thinking of the children. He was thinking of their growth and the game at large. And what happens is when you get people with these thoughts to do something like that, they're viewed as a danger to the game rather than a help to the game. You should get these people who've got these ideas around the table. Like you've got Declan, you've got young Ross here, and you've got whoever else, and good young coaches at Hibs as well, and wherever else they are. People with a wee bit of experience in the game. So what's conceived or perceived as old school, get the good practice for some old school ideas, because there's some good stuff in there as well. Get the new and invigorating stuff, and between us we can get the mix that you're talking for. But we can also produce leagues, because I think, quite frankly, that Hibs and Hearts, instead of taking the kids all over Scotland and playing football over there, they should be in a league in the area as well. The girls can do that. Hibs, Hearts, Hutchison play against Hibs girls.
I know it's different.
It is a bit, but what I'm saying to you is, up to 15, there's no difference. They didn't get a job at Hibs and Hearts. They didn't get a job. But after 15s, it is very relevant that they split away. But also in that period of time, it also lets Hibs and Hearts see the talent and playing them every week. It lets them see the talent at a Portobello or a Hutchie Vale or a Tynecastle. Do you know what I mean? And
UK's one of them.
in that way, they can pick the players more readily and with more confidence when the time's right. They might want to leave earlier because it's only a yearly contract. But what I'm saying to you is I think it makes more sense to do that. And you can maybe get a good league, you can maybe get Hibs and Hearts and two or three of the top boys club teams in the area, maybe get the top team for West Lothian, Fife produce a good team every now and again. But they're always battered with the senior clubs, or you could get the senior clubs for Fife playing. And that way the system's the same. I think we've got to standardise the system at the younger level.
So obviously we'll go and we've still got plenty of people watching. We've got some few more things to cover, but we'll go to some questions and some comments on Facebook and email from Robbie over there, some things for the panel, because I know there's been plenty of comments coming in. So what are some of the interesting points people are making, and any good questions for the panel here, Robbie?
Yeah, absolutely plenty. Thanks very much, guys. Keep them coming in. An awful lot about the general pro youth system and relationships with boys clubs. I would say that 2 weeks today we'll be doing a dedicated show on that very topic, which will be an interesting one. We felt that that show needed a night for itself. Today we're very much focusing on the coaching side of things, and we've got a good question from Scott McMillan, who coaches John Chapel United 2006s, who asks, What advice can you give on dealing with the emotions of young players? You've got players who are taking a huff at the slightest thing going wrong and going into their shell. What advice could the panel give for a coach?
So I'll open up to all of you guys, and I actually had a conversation with one of my friends who said that he left football because he felt that there was like hyper masculinity, turning kids away because maybe the coach was too loud or too aggressive, maybe trying to overcoach. So we'll go to you first, Ross, in this. How do you deal? I know you take with the additional. Would you ever see a player turn up and saying, you don't need to drop any club's names, but I prefer here to my normal club? But
You do, it's hard. Obviously, what we try for our coaches is just to be positive, to encourage the players no matter what. That's the biggest thing for us, because you want to put confidence in the player. The minute that lost, then you've lost them, that's it. It's hard to rebuild that back. So whatever we do, we just try and be enthusiastic as possible, as Declan was saying. Try and encourage them. If they make mistakes, you don't get on their back. It's an important thing. As I said before, they'll learn eventually themselves to stop making the mistakes without you screaming at the sideline. Again, us it's different because we've not got the Sunday matches, so we're not bothered about results. We have them for the hour, but we're just there to try and make them better. As I say, I think positivity is the biggest thing. You need to relate with them. If you can't relate with them either, it can be difficult.
There's a wee bit of that we need to do as coaches at clubs as well. It's not relate everything to what happened to the game. It's something we've already identified that there are needs of the game that kids just need to go through a process of developing, whether it's physical, whether it's mental, whether it's tactical, technical, whatever subject you're going to pick on, and actually just coach them on that basis. And I think you'll find most of the kids will actually know what they want to work on as well.
Exactly. Well, that's why, especially even with the one-to-one training, they'll come to you and they'll notice that I'm struggling with this, so you can work on that. So as I say, they pick it up themselves.
Somebody's better at me than this.
Exactly.
And Tam, obviously you've been through kind of a lot, so I suppose that's 2006 is the day that was mentioned. I imagine you'll have had 10 and 11 year olds at some point. How difficult is it to manage the emotions of players at that age?
Well, I think a lot of the emotions of the kids are governed by the adults when they build them, whether it's a parent or whether it's a coach.
Try to fulfil their own failed dreams, parents?
Well, maybe reflect the glory, stuff like that. But I think the kid ultimately is expressing his failure and pleasing his adults when they do it. I think how that manifests itself. I remember getting a player under 16s for those club. He had a shot at goal for 30 yards, and he shouted F, the F word to the highs. And what he was basically doing there, he was saying, just by doing that, didn't shout at me because I kind of cocked it up, and I didn't need you to tell me. That's what he's saying subconsciously. So when a kid grows up with that constant threat and that constant, you've got to do better, I think that's how you get these tantrums and these type of emotions.
Because it's obviously we've talked a lot about drills, about pathways, long-term development, but the emotional side, the mental side of things are a huge part of the game, and there's more research done on it day in, day out. But obviously under 12s is quite a close age group to the 2006s that Scott was talking about there. But how do you deal with it at Hearts and in your own academy? Boys maybe come in and they're maybe crying as they turn up to train.
I've got a very emotional team. They're very emotional. If they lose a game, if they make individual errors and mistakes, they cry a lot. It was something I had to deal with. I didn't really have much experience dealing with it. It was a challenge. It was just maybe your information you give to them and telling them that I'm never going to moan at them for making mistakes. If my goalie does something, my centre-back does something, centre mid, and it leads to a goal or whatever, I'm never ever going to moan at them. They'll learn from it and then try and improve on it. But they were very emotional and hard on themselves, so I'm trying to ease that off them and explaining that I want them to win, but if they don't, it's not the end of the world. I'll never put that pressure on them and make them even more emotional. That was kind of my point earlier about it's not win at all costs. It's development first, especially with the level within the academy.
Graeme, was it Clark Drive, I believe, that you had some involvement with a few years ago? Could you tell when players got to that age how they'd been coached and how they'd been emotionally dealt with as younger players?
I think it was different at the time when you're dealing with adults. I think what I found in that dressing room though was intelligent people, so they all held quite respectable professional jobs. So the emotions would probably kick on as to what they'd experienced throughout their football career, but most of them were able to sort of deal with it. And I think that's just picking up from the question there. I think that's probably another big challenge in being a coach is dealing with characters, you know, and especially at those young ages, you've no idea what sometimes the kids have come from to come to your training session and your game, what they're going home to, you know, what else is going on, be it at school or within their friend circle, and that's a whole other area that requires a huge amount of work from the professional clubs in particular, but it's not easy, you know. So you think about coaching, we're talking about going on a 1.1 or 1.2, you've not got to be a psychologist, you know, you've not got to be a sports scientist, you've not got to be this and the other, it's not easy.
They change when they get older by that.
They also look at psychology, people want to come into the game.
Yeah.
I mean, do they fit in proper people we have with children? I mean, I know my daughter was went to teaching college. It took her about 3 years or 2.5 years before she got to loosen a bunch of kids, and that was under supervision. But the whole fact that somebody could just go and sit a first touches certificate and, in inverted commas, is a fully licensed coach, and then he can go and start a football team, it's quite frightening. And I think of the lessons over the recent past, with abuse and all the rest of it, I think we've got to be very careful who can start football teams, and there's got to be a lot more due diligence in that particular field. That's why I think the programme that's given out, I think there should be an intensive programme at the start with all different psychology tests in it to see if people are fit and proper people to be in charge of children.
What's your opinion on it, Rob, in particular? How would you deal with an emotional player? How do you like to see it dealt with?
I think I like to see it dealt with patience, because as I say, actually what you're trying to do is allow the kid the ability to show emotional intelligence, and by emotional intelligence actually sometimes screaming after or whatever, or being upset at a misplaced pass. You're right, it's sometimes linked to other things, but actually having the awareness to show that emotion is a good thing. So telling kids, oh no, don't do that, don't behave like that, you've got to be careful about the way you word these things, and as I think really the first kind of thing you come from is come from a point of care. You're right, buddy, what's wrong? So we'll have a pass. Is there anything we can do? Do you know what I mean? And sometimes it means taking them aside, and where it falls down at grassroots is that sometimes there's only one parent taking a session. So how much time do you have to deal with whoever?
Trying to
you're not your business.
come back in, or do you leave them? It comes down as what you're saying as well, personality. So some players need to be told to go over and comforted, come on, it's fine. Whereas others will take a huff, they'll sit for 2 minutes and they'll find themselves, nah, I'm getting back in.
The first thing I did when I realised the team was very emotional was to find out why they're like that. Obviously there might be things out with, but I don't think it was the case with my team. They're just very hard on themselves, they set very high standards. They're a talented group of players, and when they don't get the result or whatever, they become emotional. So that's when I was touching on trying to implement a philosophy that allows them to express themselves and their talent and not have that emotional side. But it's not something you always take out of them, because emotion can be good if it's channeled in the right way. I think it's channeling it.
What you want is you want them to develop coping mechanisms. So how do I cope with something going wrong? How do I cope with having a bad day at school or uni, whatever age you are, even if you're working? How do I go to football with the mindset of I'm here to take my mind off all that? And then if something does go wrong, what's my first thought? If my first thought is effort, then it's probably the wrong first thought, because actually we should be, again, you look at research and you look at how people deal with setbacks, and it's mostly a case of, oh well, it's happened and we move on now. It's happened. If I'm in game or in training, there shouldn't be a focus on what's just happened. Your actual focus should be on what's happened next, or what's happening next. What have I got to do now? What's the next part of the process that the coach has set up? What's the next decision I've got to make? And sometimes that's just a case of helping the kids refocus on that then. Forget about the misplaced pass, forget about that, what have you got to do next?
I think on that side, I remember watching a guy called Tosh Farrell, who at the time was working in the Everton Junior Academy, and there was again, the guys had mentioned an SFHCPD event, and actually when you go along with these things you probably expect to see something totally different. You know, he's worked in English Premier League, he was part of Wayne Rooney's sort of development in the Everton first team, and his session at the start was actually quite basic, and had it not been for his enthusiasm and the way he spoke with the players and everything, I think it would have broken down very quickly. But he actually let it run for a good 3, 4, 5 minutes from doing the same thing repetitively. It was only 3-4 yards apart, passing the ball back and forward, and he was making comments as they were doing it. And then he stopped him and came to the coaches. He says, the one thing that we want to do, and what I want to do in my sessions, is make sure a kid arrives with a smile, leaves with a smile. Whatever happens in the middle, we can work on, we can improve, we can analyse, but those are the two golden rules for me. Come with a smile, leave with a smile, job's good. Make sure the kid wants to come back. And
Definitely.
I think everybody's kind of said that at various times tonight.
Because I think sometimes that what we might forget is that we've said that we're coaching players, we've said that we're coaching athletes. Sometimes we forget that. But we probably sometimes forget that we're coaching kids, we're coaching people.
That's how important it is to educate. So she's right, because it is the kids that need someone there that's going to, they can escape if there is things going on at home. Also there is, that they can come for that hour and escape that.
You're coaching potential the next policeman, you're coaching the potential next kind of teacher. So I think that's a better way to look at it than you're coaching the next professional footballer. And what skills they learn in terms of coping with setbacks or being upset at something will do them a service later on in life when something else goes wrong. It's the same mental skills that you use, whether it's on the football park or whether it's sitting and doing an exam at school.
One of the aspects of the Hearts philosophy is nurturing young people, which I think is good. It also takes away from football. You're developing people and giving them the life skills that will not just use in football but in other means of life moving forward, which is important.
So this will probably invoke some debate both here and in the comments, so keep them coming. But we had a couple of comments, saying that pro youth players are taken too young. Sometimes there's too many that are taken on board in general. So go to you guys first, from the kind of grassroots side and from the extra additional training side. Where is it just grassroots players that you guys?
No, both. So
right. So
obviously we've got a lot of talented kids as well that are at that stage where clubs are approaching them, and what we tell them is it all depends on who's going to develop you best. If you're happy where you are, you're developing well, the coach is looking after you, think you're going to go on and move forward from that, stay where you are. If you think that you can go there, you're going to get better training, it's going to make you a better player, then that's where you go. As I say, it's up to the parents as well to give the best advice, but it's just being in an environment that is going to develop you best as a player. If you're good enough at 12 and you're with a coach that's developing you, you're still going to be good enough at 15 and 16.
And Tam, obviously, I imagine we'll probably get the polar opposites here, but do you think, just like, if you were to think about it, do you think Hutchison Vale had too many players taken from them, or do you think they're taking too young to the club academy?
I think that the senior club's asking players for Hutchison Vale's a good thing for the club, because it's a recognition that there must be doing something at the senior, junior, at the low levels that's relevant, because as we said, it's about, I think Rob touched on it, it's producing people with good mindsets as well as everything else. It's about empowering them football wise, but it's also about them having manners and acting appropriately. And what we try and do is, our result at the end of the day is nearly 90 minutes in the game. My result when I take boys for under 8s and I commit to them, and I do commit to them to under 17s, every one of them that I start with, I take. I'm going to get rid of players. If they leave to go, then I need to replace them. That's different. But I get phone calls quite regularly for boys to come. We've got a boy from Coatbridge, he just came because he wanted to come to Hutchison Vale and the team that I've got today. So I commit to them, and that's what I think development's about, because they're children. And I think getting anybody involved at this level, you've got to understand children before you understand football. And if you can understand both, then you want to watch with that person. And I think that should underpin. But as far as the senior clubs go, I think there's a lot of things, and it's multifaceted. And it's a business as well. I mean, boys that they get within the year of their 12th birthday, when they get transferred later on, they qualify for the solidarity mechanism. We lose players, not just to Hibs, to Hearts. I mean, everybody thinks when you go through Glasgow, you give players to Hibs. And then you anybody, Hibs maybe been a wee bit more proactive on that front in dealing with Hutchison Vale over the years. And they've had an awful lot of good players with Hutchison Vale. And I've counted that played in the Hibs first team, there's over 110, and there's about 60 at Hearts. That's quite a lot of players, and we've got them on name and nothing to do. So they can't say we've never given them the players. But what I would say is that when we phone up, when the Hibs phone up and we get a player taken for us, and this is the discrepancy in the game, I think. We could develop a player for 5-year-old like Ethan, and Celtic what time he wouldn't go in or the rest of it, and he can maybe go somewhere in Scotland. We'll get not a penny. In fact, very seldom. It's only lately since the Graemes came in that we actually got a wee acknowledgement if players get their first professional contract. We got a wee letter from us thanking us and a wee certificate, which I think is nice and it's certainly recognition. I've had a couple of weeks with Roger at Hearts, and I think they're going down a similar road, which is, at least it's a recognition. But we've lost so many, like Paul Hanlon's been a great, he only ever played for Hutchison, and he only ever played for Hibs. Hutchison doesn't make a penny, he was with us for 8 years. We're not looking for a penny, but what I'm saying is, I think there should be a reassessment. I mean, if a player moves from Hibs to Hearts at under 12s, for instance, and he's been with Hibs for 2 or 3 years, there's certain amount of money that club will get. And I think that's a big disparity. But that's not what's important here. What's important is the child in the middle. And what Hibs and Hearts both do, to their credit now, they never used to, but they'll send a letter in if there's an interest in a child. So I've got to tell the parent that that letter's there, because that's important, that the parents find out.
I mean, it is,
And the parents will then make a decision based on the age and stage of development they're at. They'll balance that against, if they want an opinion from me, the coach, and they'll balance it against other opinions they maybe get for the wider family. They'll also balance it against experiences for family members that have been through the pro youth system and all the other particular things. And if the kid wants to go at that point, then he'll go. If he doesn't, he'll stay. But what I've done recently, instead of taking boys to loads of tournaments that we used to do at Hutchison, I take the kids down to the academies in England. The last team I had, we had 9 visits to academies between under 13s and 16s, including Man United, Liverpool, played all these clubs. And what an experience for the kids. And one of them even ended up at one of the clubs, at Ethan at Man United. And Ethan, Reagan Head returned doing a scholarship at Liverpool. He's at Celtic now. So it was good for them, because it opened their eyes to not just the Scottish options, but the English options. And why shouldn't it? The other side of the coin is, if a player for Hutchison goes to England, for some reason we get loads of money for it. But that's good, because clubs like this are struggling at this level, and we keep producing players. I mean, Jason Cummins is at Hibs because I made the phone call to James McDonough. Lee Griffiths is at Celtic because I made the phone call when he was in my team to Paul Connolly at Livingston, because I knew he would be able to look after him properly. But I phoned other clubs and there was too much baggage and all that, but he's done well for himself and it's great. So what I'm saying is, I would rather they go at 9, 10, 11 and 12. But if they're 15, 16, 17, I've phoned Hearts for Jonathan Brown as well, and loads of others that they'll not tell you about. But if they're there at 15, 16 and they've got genuine talent, and I think they can play, they've got to get away from Hutchison. The same with Graeme Bregner, I had him when he was younger. He wasn't able to leave us to go to Man United earlier. He went at the Christmas because he thinks we're going to win the Scottish Cup. I says, no, you go now. It's no boot winnings. But he did come up and watch us in the Scottish Cup final with one in Glenrothes. But what I'm saying to you is, you can't be selfish enough to keep the boys. But I put the kids first, and I think the pro youth system can be very, very cruel to children at times if it's not done properly. Because if a child goes home with his parent, I've just signed for, I know it's unfair to mention a club, but Club X. The first thing his granny says to him, oh son, see when you get older, you can buy my house. So that child internalises all that. A year later he's out the door. The first thing that child thinks is, no, I'm going to play for Hutchison Vale, I'm going to play for Tynecastle. No, the first thing they think is, I've let do my granny, I've let do my auntie, I've let do my mum and dad. That's the way they look at it. So when you take a kid into the system, please prepare them, firstly by saying, look, you're only coming along to training. Your bread and butter's Hutchison Vale, your bread and butter's Portobello or Edinburgh Hibs. That's your bread and butter, and then you go and play there. You're only coming here because then you hide behind the badge and try and be the big person and say you're coming to this magnificent team because you're a coach. And do you know what I mean? Sometimes it's about the coach selling it big time, and it's a big letdown for the kid at the end. So it's going to be carefully thought through, and I would like to see some sort of record, the fallout, stats. We get stats thrown at us all the time for all different quarters in football. Let's see the stats on the kids that are out the game at 11-year-old. They're giving it up at 11-year-old because they've been kicked out of what club at 9 and 10 and all that nonsense. And I would always say to the clubs as well, beware of the parents phoning and telling their kids the next great thing because they're leading their kid down the wrong road.
So obviously Declan, and go to you as well, Graeme, later, but you'll have first-hand experience, and I suppose you can now say why you believe it is a good thing to take these boys on at 12 and 11 years old. And I suppose as well, when you maybe have to prepare, or other coaches in Hearts that have to prepare to tell a player that he's going to get released, it's not going to be easy for the coach either, is it?
It would be the hardest part. Part I've not had to deal with yet, and I'll take it when it comes, but I always just look to the positives of coaching the young footballers at good facilities, playing against Celtic, Rangers, Hibs every week, against the so-called best opposition in Scotland for their age, which you think is going to develop the players, maximise their potential. It can be difficult with the boys club thing, with getting against pro youth and no real debate. You won't get in too much, but I just see it as trying to maximise their potential as much. If I'm at Hearts, I'll work with the kids as best I can. If I was at Lochend or Hutchison or Tyngy, I'd work with the kids as best I could. So the clubs are irrelevant, it's the kids that are important when working with them.
And Graeme, obviously I know that the senior team, in terms of, when you're looking at players, they run with squad limits, so you could never have too many players because you'll not be able to all have them in the squad. And I think is it 23 for this season now, or 25?
Yeah.
But do the youth teams at Hibs work similarly?
We've actually cut our numbers across the academy. I think this is probably another long-winded answer, guys, so forgive me. But I think a lot of this is really relevant here, that we actually, and the numbers might surprise people, have 85 registered players in our entire academy, from top to bottom. So I think...
So how many teams is that?
Well, that's from under 11 through to under 17.
That's not a lot. No.
Yeah, so I think the concept of clubs taking a big number of players and spitting a big number out, I must admit, I would probably argue with that now, that we are being very, as much as we can, scientific in what we're doing. So our youngest group every year will be a mix between the age group that should be under 11s and under 10s, purely because we look at, if there's two senior clubs in Edinburgh going to compete in the Club Academy Scotland framework, both of us can sign 20 players each at every academy level. They were the best one in the world. Is there 40 players in Edinburgh, born in 2006, that are good enough to go and progress through a talent pathway? Highly unlikely. So why would we do it? So what we're actually now looking at and saying, can we get a hardcore group of the younger age group and put them in there? So now we're almost having the numbers ourselves without Project Brave having to tell us to do it or anything else, because that's what we believe is the right thing to do. Now for the first month or so of the season, it was a challenge, because you've got 9-year-olds playing against in the under 11 group, and then they go and start catching up with themselves, and the development of these players has been great. So that's one part I think where we're genuinely trying to help the clubs, that we're not trying to fill our academy now full of numbers. What we do now, if players are injured or ill or can't make games, we move players up. It's easy to do. We've got 85 players to facilitate so many teams, so there's not really any great issue with actually having to find another left back for this team. We just move the players in and get them games.
I suppose that will kind of buoy the player up a bit if he gets that surprise text on Friday night. By the way, Jamie Hamilton from the 13s can't play. Do you want to play left back?
Without a doubt. So there is that flexibility in the game, but we've touched on that. A couple of other things that you'd asked about this at the trial process. I think the training process that we've got, for me, is still absolutely the right thing to do for a number of reasons, but it also leaves us very vulnerable, because see, within a 4 or a 6 week trial period, the kid gets to see a short glimpse into what your club's about, and then at the end of that period you might say to them that you want to come or you don't want to come. See, if you have them in for months, there's no hiding place. They see everything, warts and all. So see, by the time you come to the stage and say we would like you to join our club,
he might say no.
Absolutely.
I think it's a good thing, because there's not the least he's found that out, instead of signing for 6 months and Christmas time he's like, I don't want to be here anymore.
Exactly.
It's been a wasted time. So it's
we've all agreed in terms of coaching environment that challenging players and making things not too difficult, but asking questions and letting them solve the problems is key to development, and that I would say is why you have to almost work with grassroots with pro youth clubs, is for the simple reason that some kids need that little bit more competitiveness, or they can make the decisions that bit quicker than everybody else. So put all those kids in one group together, whether it be for Hearts or Hibs or Livingston, whoever, and say, right, can you do that on a weekly basis? As long as you guys, and we're both talking about grassroots environments at a long thing, as long as you guys can implement a good working, a good playing environment for them, there's really no issue with it. And that's from kind of sports science perspective, that's from working at pro youth, working at grassroots, and also as a parent. I see it as it's a positive. Tal mentioned that sometimes the parents can handle it not so great, and I think when we've had from the younger age groups, we've had kids going to Hibs and Hearts, and on both occasions myself and fellow coach Simon would just go and enjoy yourself. Please remember that our training's on a Thursday, we play our games on a Sunday morning, so it doesn't clash with Hearts or Hibs training. Go and enjoy it, go and use it as an extra training session. If something comes with it, well, fantastic, we wish you all the best.
I think on that side as well, Ryan, that, you know, Tam and I have had a lot of really good open conversations since I've come into this job, and actually I'm finding now a little bit that the tide's turning a little bit. So we've now got clubs saying, look, we're setting up this training programme for the kids at these ages, and we will actively discourage them from going into a professional club for these ages and stages. Now, and being very open again, my challenge, and Tam and I have spoken about this, is if we write for a kid at whatever age it might be, and the club, and I actually had one today come in where the club is actively discouraging a parent and a family from coming to train one night a week to experience that, I'll leave that on the table. However, my point is that if that is the case, our challenge as a club is to make sure that our coaching and development process is better than what they're going to get with the grassroots club. So that, and I'm being very honest here, so I don't need to go back and ask the question at 12. Because see if that's the case, what they've done in our environment between 8 or 9 or 10 and 12 hasn't been as good as what they've been getting in the grassroots club. So actually, Tam's right, and that actually causes us a bigger issue.
But there's also that many variables, like you sometimes can't even get scientific with it. There are that many variables to consider with kids at that age that it might even just change a little bit more natural than that. The fact that the kid that's been at Hearts or Hibs for 4 years might just suddenly lose his motivation, might be a wee bit like, come on, I've had enough of taking it this serious for so long. And they might know, they might go, do you know what, this is for me. There are that many variables that you need to consider, that actually supporting grassroots and making sure it's as well coached and as well managed as possible, and allowing that movement between the two, having good relationships between clubs, it's what's best for the
I
players.
suppose, and if you're trying to make your training programme the best it can so that it beats Hutchie Vale's, then Hutchie Vale want to make their training programme better than yours so that they're beating you, so hopefully it brings out best practice.
I don't see it in competition with anybody, I just see it as building on what we've done in the past, but it's not a static entity, it's evolving with the times, it's evolving with sports science, it's evolving with the needs of the children. They're a different child now for 30 years ago when I started at Hutchie Vale, you know, and we've got to make sure that we've got that sports science element which we have, we've got a badge system, we've still got the kids' school, although we're revamping that, as you know, we're starting a Hutchie Foundation, which will bring in the much needed money into the club. And also, I didn't see it in competition because ultimately, good players, I want them to go to Hibs and Hearts or Celtic Rangers or anybody, any senior club, so because that's the kid's dream when he comes to you as a 6-year-old. He doesn't want to go and play for Hutchie Vale when he's 21. Hutchie Vale can't do anything for him. You know, our players can 95% of grassroots teams. So obviously it's about managing that through, but it's doing it with the kids' dream, but also what the kid wants. You know, and the parents, you can't play God with the kid. You've got to make sure that the most important people in the kid's life, which is his parents, know about everything and the interest that comes for the senior members. But they've also got to have that wee bit input and take that semblance for everybody around about them in football that they know, so they know that they're making the right decision. I'm sure Graeme and Declan would agree with that the kid coming in's got to be, you know, because sometimes we hit best is best be best in Scotland. But as I said to Matt Votter when we had 4 boys in the Scotland team, and by the way, a lot of the senior teams kicked up holy war about that. Hutchie Vale had 4 players in the under-14 Scotland squad, and the rest was pro-youth. I think it was 2 for Hibs and 1 for Hearts at the time. Their representatives at the time didn't like that. And Matt Votter said to me, "You've got to let them go, Tom." I said, I'm not stopping them. Nathan's on the trail with Celtic, there's Jack Creek's been with Celtic about a tour with them. I'm not saying they can't go. The parents are maybe thinking they're heading off for the right moment when they're 15, 16. But I said, and he says, but they must play best v best. I say, see where you come from, Matt, you come from Holland. See, in Holland it's technical best v technical best. See, in Scotland it's physical best v physical best. And there's Argo records there of boys that have left Hutchie Vale at a very young age, and they're half the player when they hit 15, 16 because they've got knee injuries and problems because of the physicality of the game. I can give you a whole team list of them.
I think what's key is we're talking about the kind of the process of going into the club, but also the process of going out of the club at some stage, because as we've identified that most of them will not make it. It's impossible. Right? They're rarely think Hibs have managed it once and Hearts have managed it maybe once to fill a team with young boys for the academy. But having recruited for Edinburgh City last pre-season, worked with Hibs, worked with Hearts and various other clubs, what was key for me when the players then started coming in through the door was they were short of kind of like guidance. They were a bit lost because something that they had worked hard or not so hard to get access to and suddenly been kind of whipped away from. So I think that maybe it has to be a wee bit of review on what support can you give. And I'm not having a go at any one club, I'm just, there's definitely a common theme and a trend that the kids coming out of pro youth seem a little bit disillusioned.
And I think, sorry, go on. Well, one thing I was going to say is that you mentioned Holland there, and we spoke about other countries, and this is just kind of a curveball, but it's part of the Project Brave thing that we're talking about, so it'll maybe go away in a different tangent, but it's recommended more futsal and under 16 football, or up to under 16 football moving to the summer. In general, are we in favour of those type of things? Do we think futsal can be beneficial to young players? I mean, we've all said we'd like to find the Scottish solution, but
any kind of sport and activity is good for kids. Development at an elite level or at just a very basic, can we be as healthy as possible and encourage good movement parts? Anything, so if it's futsal, swimming, basketball, rugby, whatever it is, it's good for them. I'm a positive influence. Summer football I think we make.
I mean, it's been years. Do we think? I mean, it's been years in the making summer football for young
I would just say
kids.
as a coach who's got probably wet feet 9 times out of 10 every night of the week.
It's like
although I wouldn't get that much dryers in the summer. Do you know what I mean? But at the same point, I think it would make a difference to your fixtures and your games. You have more games because there's more light, etc. So I would be all for
into that one. I mean, futsal definitely is an integral part of your programme. It's a great thing. I like the futsal stuff.
What did you guys think from the club academy side when you heard that we'd be having futsal in the winter times with you?
I think if it's more hours they do in a sport, it's good. If it's more touches in the ball, they can relate futsal to their football when it's
more touches in the ball.
I think it can only be a positive thing. I wouldn't look at it in a negative way at all.
So just one thing that I suppose that's maybe a criticism is overcoaching and how we can overcoach a player. Now, this is something that I've brought on from Bonnet and Thistle, and it's about systems of play. And I don't know if the camera can kind of zoom in. That's for 2-2-1 indoor, other small-sided games. So it's different ways to set the team up, offensively, defensively, the transition, things like that. Now, a lot of grassroots club might balk at that. They think, Jesus, I don't think my club could take something like that on, or a philosophy like that on. So, is this type of thing overcoaching, or is it the type of thing that we should be looking to do more of?
I think for me, I'm going to take it away slightly from the coaching aspect. I'm looking at identifying players at a first team level. Very, very few centre backs now, and at the upper ages and coming into the senior level now, know how to header the ball, can be aggressive and strong in the air. Because, and I think it probably comes into everything we've spoken about here, the game's changed, so we want the game to be on the floor. We're now playing on more AstroTurf, so that we encourage a passing game, which is great, and I'm not wanting us to get away from that. But it changes the dynamic of the game massively. So, you know, you're asking things here about coaching philosophies and do we overcoach. I mean, I remember learning a lot of when I grew up from down the park. So there was a big guy that you knew you were never going to be able to fight, so you had to come up with something different, and the wee quick guy you were never going to be able to catch up with. So, and I was the worst player down at my part, believe it or not, so I had to find ways of actually trying to be better than everybody there. And that environment taught you.
That comes into you make your own decisions, doesn't it?
It did, and I remember when Gordon, he was 2 years above me, he lived down the road from me. I remember he played for a team called Edinburgh Thistle, and it was a Johnny that took him to Jamaica, and he used to have his wee dog in his pipe. And he used to watch a game and he'd just go, well done boys, well done. He just let him play.
Society's changed an awful lot since then.
I'm not saying that that's the way, but I'm saying it's about your point.
Because we don't play football down the park anymore even.
But you ken the great thing, we played 20-a-side up at Muirhouse Park at Craigleiston, and nobody had bibs on. But you ken if he was in your team. What was that? It was sharp in the mind, maybe you take the bibs away from it. Because when kids are going to concentrate more on who's in their team, maybe we shouldn't have bibs at training.
There's a bright idea there. So every youth coach, your next session, no bibs.
I have to say we've done it before because we forgot the bibs. So it's just been a case of, right guys, sorry, get on with it.
I must say, I do think things like that are good. Trying to implement a philosophy for a football club, and I know that Warrington have got bigger aspirations than staying at grassroots, and they've been on board for that in a while, and Graeme has some experience of that as well. But not every club's the same, and I suppose that's the thing that it comes down to, is resources. But what we spoke about earlier, as we just kind of come to finishing up, was people, players that are scared to maybe express themselves or scared to make decisions. Do you think that comes from over-coaching, or do you think that there's something else in there? Like, as a coach at the side of the park saying, right, shoot, pass, tuck in, is that too much, or should he maybe just let it?
It takes away the decision-making aspect of it. So you're playing a game of football, what you're looking for the kids to do is be able to scan an area and pick the best choice, or their perceived best choice, what options they've got open to them. And if they can't scan because they're constantly being given instruction, then that will, under no kind of losing it, will affect their game, and it will affect their decision making, and it won't be as good as a kid who was allowed to make his own decisions.
Information is needed to an extent from the side of the coach into the park, but to tell me pass here, pass there, move there, then they're just your robots doing everything you say, and they're not learning themselves and expressing themselves.
They're not concentrating. They're concentrating.
Just
to tell them what to do rather than just going and doing it themselves.
There are ways of developing in a way that, again, you can go looking at other clubs in Europe who develop kind of like football language, where the coach will kind of have one-worded little kind of thingy, and that maybe just twigs of his memory, or a bit of worked on it, or he's been taught it in an environment that allows him to develop his own decision making. And in a way, I suppose that's probably one of the hardest tasks.
I don't think you're talking about that over-coaching. I think it's good for the club to have a manual. We have a standards document. It's a six chapters of the standards, how you should turn up for a match, how you should conduct yourself in training. There's all the different styles they play, commensurate at the age and stage of development that they're at. Those standards documents actually include recruitment, where everybody actually, it's about a 6-month probation period. If I see them shouting the ball at the kids, or catch them shouting the ball at the kids, they'll be put away, because they're not good to the kid. They think of the kid first always. I think they've got to make decisions at a young age. If they make decisions at that age, and you hear it all the time, you've got kids now growing up, they can't make decisions about that. There's one commentator, was one of them playing away in a European game, and I remember the commentator saying, the manager, whoever he was, will be able to wait till he gets them in at half time until he instructs them how to play. Why can we not sort of the park? There's a lack of leadership there, and that's because they've been brought up and not pampered, but I think what you're saying, overcoach. You've got to empower. Ultimately, all education is about empowerment. Empower the individual, and if you allow that to happen, and that depends on the mentality of the coach. Does he allow the players to do that? And I always think the great managers that were brought up in the housing schemes were comfortable with who they were. So let the players be who they were out in the park. And you could go through them, Shankly, Steen, Busby, Fergie. They all come from the industrial areas. It's an industrial game, football, and we're losing that a lot. But what they do is, because their comfort level with themselves absolute, they are the players. There was a great quote at Parkhead when I went through there, and Bertie Auld, it says, the manager works us hard Monday to Friday, and on Saturday he gives us a day off to play football. I think that's brilliant.
That is good. That's actually quite a good point, just to move on to some final questions and comments from Robbie over there, because I know that we're still having plenty of viewers just now. So Robbie, what are some of the comments that have been coming in and some of the questions?
Yeah, loads coming in. Thanks to everyone, and very little that we haven't touched upon because the debate's been so wide-ranging, but a couple of interesting things. We've got Connor Ward, who has asked, what advice can you give to coaches to mechanically break down the coaching points within their sessions? You'll see obviously a lot of sessions which run very smoothly, but that's only half the battle, isn't it?
Okay, so that's actually quite a good point. It means we can end in some advice, so as coaches, as people who are, as football people, what are the best ways to do that? And go to yourself first.
In regards to coaching points during the drill, I think you've got to assess the situation, analyse it yourself. If you're making a stoppage or you're giving information to the kids, I'd always be short and precise with it. I think if you start speaking for far too long, the kids will start to wander about and they won't process information in the right way. I think be short, precise with a couple of points that are relevant, the main theme of it, and then the kid will go away and remember, and he'll start to implement that within his game.
At the Golden Grey Soccer Academy, do you notice immediately when there's a point where you can break the session down?
Obviously there'll be wee mistakes, but you don't want to step in every time there's a mistake, or you'd be stepping in every 2 minutes. So once the drill really starts to break down, that's where you think, right, you can bring them in for a quick 30 seconds, tell them this is why it's not working, this is what we can do. But even while the drill's going on, you can just wee things, you can say them without actually having to stop a drill. You don't want to stop the drill because that breaks down. As Declan says, they get bored. So it was just feed wee bits of information in as they're doing it. Don't stop them, don't pull them aside, just let it flow. If it really starts to break down, that's when you maybe have to step in and think, right, this is what's happening, this is why it's happening.
Go for it. Personally, I try and, I know this maybe sounds a bit crazy, I try and plan my stoppages. I try and foresee maybe the problems that some of the kids will actually have. And sometimes there's a tendency, depending on the age group, to ignore the problem and let them work it out themselves. Because the more you do that, the more they recognise their own mistakes. Because they realise that what you've asked them to do, you've given them an objective, and it might be 3 passes and then we get a shot at that target, or we get a rebound, or whatever it might be, and it's not working. They're going, obviously, why is it not working? And all of a sudden, they then start to take responsibility, and it goes back to leadership, it goes back to decision making again. And so for that point, it's key to give them that control over that at times. Yes, there are times where, probably more so when you're doing technical sessions, where you might want to point out that they look awfully unbalanced whilst they're trying to receive a volley, or you might want to speak to them about their feet positions and how they move. But it's key to try and first of all let them try and sort it, and then if they can't sort it, can you go on in a positive manner, and again, can you ask the question first without telling them the answer? What is it that's going wrong here? Can everybody see it? Can I just go to that? Sometimes what's difficult with coach education, because coach education, especially when you go to your 1.3 and you're asked to deliver stuff, you're asked to make stoppages. You're asked to actually intentionally stop something because they're assessing your inability to know the information. Whereas, and then when we go out coaching, I think some coaches take that into the sessions that they're coaching, but in actual fact, you're only being asked to do that at coach education because you need to show you've understood the content as such. So.
And it depends as well, if you've got 2 coaches, it's always easier. Yeah. Because, especially when we're doing technical stuff, I can keep the drill going. They'll go and quickly tell them at the side, so they're not stopping it, you're not singling players out, you're just having a wee word with them, right them back in, and then they fix it the next time. So again, it depends.
Now we probably should rein it in there. It's been a great time. I don't even know if you guys have noticed, but we've been here for a long time. We've got some good comments coming in. We've got one here, I agree, too many coaches speak too much, from Christopher Heenan. We've also had Scotland have lost hundreds of Messis over the decades, if not thousands, because we prioritise physicality over skill. I think we've started to see now that we're not doing that anymore. We're definitely not trying to do that. Someone else says, who's the Hearts coach here? And then we've got 3 quickly going, Declan, Fergus, talented young coach. So, well, and we've also got someone asking who's going to win the Old Firm. Well, I think that's probably one that we'll leave for another day, but thanks very much everyone for being here. Thanks to all the comments that we've had as well. Join us next week where we'll be talking about refereeing, I believe. Yes, refereeing and touchline behaviour. But thanks to Tam, to Ross, to Rob, to Declan and to Graeme. It's been a pleasure having you here. Thanks everyone for their comments, for their questions. Thanks as well to the clubs here for allowing you to come along and give your opinions. So all we can do now is just thank everyone else for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.